Terror gripped the world as the gate opened and a giant dragon spewed forth a destructive beam, marking the fall of all things. Thousands of helpless people fell into the abyss, but amidst the chaos, a lucky few awakened incredible abilities. These awakened ones, clad in armor and wielding magic, were dubbed the saviors of mankind, the last pillar of it. They were called players, and among these brave warriors was one special one whose destiny was just beginning to unfold. This young man, Lee Hyun-wook, an F-ranked player known as a great steel tamer, was facing the unknown. He, like so many others, was called the last hope of humanity. But that hope turned out to be as fragile as broken glass. Suddenly he woke up standing upside down, howling at the realization that his so-called hope had turned into a living hell. Around him, soldiers performed grueling exercises while the instructor loudly commanded them to keep their heads straight. He found himself at the gate of the OPM, the Monster Countermeasures Unit, where all people with awakened abilities were summoned. The guy was in complete shock, not understanding how he, who was considered the last hope of mankind, could be in this place. A vast OPM training ground spread out before him, a place of rigorous training and preparation for the inevitable battles with monsters. The instructor was furiously reprimanding the recruits, questioning how they, supposedly the strongest, had managed to lose as many as 9 rounds of ammunition. At this moment, Lee Hyun-wook, hanging upside down, secretly used his unique ability, attracting lost ammunition. The instructor, noticing the returned rounds, became even more furious, yelling that they were completely insane without understanding the reason. The frightened soldiers answered the instructor with glee that they were not. They did nothing, trying to avoid his menacing wrath. The boy's gaze fell on a system window showing that the weight of metal available to him for manipulation was only 300 grams. He wondered gloomily how not to go crazy here, since this was his second time in the army, and he remembered absolutely everything. Suddenly, the ruins of the near future appeared before his mind's eye, where a lone cloaked figure stood amidst the devastation. He remembered his death, when, bleeding, he realized it was not the monsters who had ruined humanity, but the players themselves, who had become traitors. The masked man bent over him, bitterly stating the fall of the hero, the tamer of steel, and disbelieving this terrible reality. The same masked cloaked man called him F-ranked player, Mr. Lee Hyun-wook, looking at his lifeless body. This traitor said with a sneer that Lee Hyun-wook was wrong, because they are the supreme beings who decide the fate of mankind. The dying guy vehemently objected that they were not divine at all, but ordinary villains, and wished he had gotten stronger sooner. The traitor indifferently advised him not to grieve, for even with this knowledge, his fate would be predetermined and unchangeable. He gloatingly added that Lee Hyun-wook would still be useless and die, and such a death was fated for him. Another villain, huge and muscular, swung a giant club, saying that such an end was befitting his low rank. In the last moment before the club collapsed, the guy desperately shouted out the name of his killer or his deadly attack. That's how he died. Completely unexpecting that, like the hero of a web novel, he could somehow miraculously travel back in time. A system window appeared in front of him congratulating him, for he had figured out how to become stronger, but the weight of the available metal had decreased. The instructor, meanwhile, kept yelling at the recruits, promising to set their brains right and giving them commands to practice their commands. He realized that he had gone back in time, but his abilities had been reset to their previous level. But that didn't upset him too much. The soldiers responded to the instructor's commands with glee, shouting, "One soldier, 2!" as they continued their grueling exercises on the plots. However, despite the severity, some cartoon poster of a soldier urged them to come to their senses while commands were sounded. He couldn't understand why, of all the possible places in the past, he was drawn to the army. It was extremely frustrating for him. The instructor ordered the 3rd company of the 2nd platoon in, and the soldiers were already whispering about a possible delicious sausage dinner. Lee Hyun-wook gloomily stated that what he definitely hadn't expected was to be in this cursed place again. The instructor turned to the reserve squad, noting Corporal Lee Hyun-wook's presence, and informed them that they had business to attend to before the meal. The guy thought with despair that they had just finished a grueling workout, and they were being loaded with something urgent again. He remembered that Oh Sang-guk, the army's chief scumbag, was standing in front of him, and another instructor was offering to send his platoon. Oh Sang-guk grabbed him, mockingly noting that he couldn't budge from the F rank and had to try harder here. He remembered that in his past unreal life, he thought as if he would never be able to raise his rank while Oh Sang-guk demanded responsibility from him. The other soldiers smirked, thinking that Corporal Lee Hyun-wook should obey without bickering. After all, he did have a rank. The boy clenched his fists, bitterly realizing how pathetic and helpless he had been in his previous fictional existence. Oh Sanguk angrily asked what the man was staring at him for, clearly provoking him into conflict and showing his power in this illusion. The rascal then asked with a sneer what Lee Hyun-wook was hoping for, since he himself was a powerful D-rank holder. Unexpectedly, Lee Hyun-wook agreed with a sly smile, but asked to let them eat in peace first. He advised Oh Sang-guk to look away, hinting that coworkers might think he was abusing his position. The guy hypocritically expressed his concern that there might be strange rumors about him, because in the future, Oh Sang-guk was poised for greatness. Oh Sang-guk looked completely confused, muttering that none of this was as it should be in this fictional situation. Lee Hyun-wook assured that since an order had been given, they would eat quickly and promptly complete any unrealistic task assigned to them. Oh Sang-guk, coughing slightly, nodded approvingly, telling them to keep it that way, clearly confused by his behavior. He immediately barked at the rest of the soldiers, ordering them not to gawk but to go eat immediately, restoring his authority. Lee Hyun-wook told coworker Park Jun-mo that he would go since he had lost his appetite, to which the latter surprisingly agreed. Park Jun-mo mumbled, "Okay," confusedly, completely unaware of what was going on with his usually docile comrade-in-arms. Oh Sang-guk thoughtfully fixed his cap, wondering what it was, since it was as if Lee Hyun-wook had been replaced by someone in this world of illusion. Lee Hyun-wook mentally praised himself for a great game, realizing that that scumbag from his past deserved to be treated completely differently. He gritted his teeth, remembering the scoundrel Gordon Pressey, and realized that if he hadn't made a fuss, he wouldn't have caught up with him in rank. Suddenly, a system window appeared, informing him that the metal assimilation was complete, and another gram was available to him for control. He decided that it wasn't worth telling others about his incredible ability to increase rank in this world for now anyway. There was an uproar in the mess hall when the soldiers found no spoons, wondering if they had all been taken apart so quickly. One of the soldiers panics and tells Private Park Jun-mo that they have a serious problem. All the spoons have inexplicably disappeared. While the soldiers were bustling about, Lee Hyun-wook discreetly brought one of the stolen spoons to his mouth, preparing to eat it in this illusory world. The little tiger cub, his pet from the past that he could only see in his fantasies, exclaimed happily that steel was delicious. A system window alerted him to the start of metal assimilation, indicating that there were nearly 13 minutes of real time left until completion. He pondered that the M7 bayonet knife weighed 140 grams, and if he increased the available weight, he could manage something else. The guy lamented that shell casings only weighed a gram each, and spoons even less, and it would take too long to get back to his former rank. He looked at the Namsan Tower in the distance, wondering if there were no other options, since he had 3 days to prepare. After that, he had to single-handedly defeat a level 1 boss mob, which was an extremely difficult task for his current state. Lee Hyun-wook resolutely clenched his fist full of blue energy and declared that he would show everyone what a true expert was. 3 days later, under cover of night, the 3rd Brigade, 1st Battalion, were at Namsan's 5th post, preparing for the unknown. Park Jun-mo turned to the corporal, noticing that he hadn't been like himself lately. His behavior had become strange. He also asked if Lee Hyun-wook felt uncomfortable looking at the clock showing 4 hours and 5 minutes in the morning. Lee Hyun-wook cheerfully replied that not at all, though he was actually scrutinizing the system window hanging in the air. At this point, the assimilation of the regular metal was complete and another 6 grams were available to him for control, which was a step forward. Park Jun-mo cheerfully explained that he meant it was even for the best. His strange behavior cheered everyone up a bit. He wondered why Lee Hyun-wook had suddenly changed so much, not understanding the true reasons for his sudden confidence and vigor. Lee Hyun-wook seriously looked at his coworker and bluntly asked if he trusted him in this difficult fictional situation. Park Jun-mo, a little hesitant from surprise but readily, replied that so right, he trusts him completely in this illusion. Lee Hyun-wook quietly called out to Park Jun-mo as he turned away, preparing for something important that was about to happen. He looked at his comrade with anticipation, clutching his rifle in his hand, ready to utilize his new abilities in this world. Suddenly, creepy goblins appeared out of the blue portal, one of which sucked the life force out of the fallen soldier in this illusion. The huge goblin scout was cautiously making its way down the slope, heading towards the base where unsuspecting soldiers were sleeping peacefully. Silence reigned in the barracks, only the measured breathing of the sleepers disturbing the peace while the red hieroglyphics heralded the imminent trouble in this dream. Lee Hyun-wook stood in the forest, wielding his bayonet knife with blue energy, ready to meet the uninvited guests from the other world. Goblins have already broken into the territory, attacking defenseless soldiers, tearing them apart in this nightmarish fictional world. The guy grinned and said that he didn't think he would ever be happy about these things, as he had waited 3 whole days for this moment. He noted that ambush attacks had always worked out well for him, and assumed that he had already reached their first level of strength. Life had given him a second chance, and he certainly wasn't going to spend it as ignominiously as his previous unreal life. Lee Hyun-wook furiously rushed to attack, shouting to the goblins that if they fooled around, they would definitely die by his hand in this battle. One of the goblins he had defeated dropped a glowing red stone, and the boy realized he knew what his future might be. He did not hesitate to bring that strange stone to his mouth, using his blue energy to absorb it into this fictional world. With disgust, he commented on the taste of manastal, a special metal from another world that gave him new, incredible powers. He needed to eat this steel to get stronger. It was his unique and slightly strange path to power and illusion. The system congratulated him on his manastal absorption, informing him that an unknown number of grams and mana increases were expected. He realized that if he ate everything that contained metal, he could easily overcome all the difficulties in his path. Suddenly, another portal opened in front of him, from which a new wave of goblins rushed out, ready to fight in this unreal world. Lee Hyun-wook clenched his fist enveloped in blue energy with anticipation, and announced that his true mukbang of steel was about to begin. He quietly told Park Jun-mo, clamping his mouth shut, that he could feel the movement of the metal but he couldn't see it, creating a tense atmosphere. The guy replied that this was of course a lie, as he couldn't sense objects out of sight with his low F rank in this illusion. Park Jun-mo whispered in panic at what they should do then, completely confused in the face of a new, even more formidable danger. Lee Hyun-wook asked Park Jun-mo to promise him one thing while he goes to check everything in this dangerous fictional world around him. He ordered the coworker not to leave his position and under no circumstances to report it to his superiors so as not to spook his luck. With a sly grin, he explained that if his superiors found out, he would take all the weapons and valuable trophies from this illusion. A horde of enraged goblins with cleavers were charging straight at him, anticipating easy prey and unaware of his true strength. Lee Hyun-wook easily fought off the attackers, creating a vortex of blue energy and sharp metal blades around him. From above, the huge goblin watched as his kin circled around the lone soldier, unable to break through his defenses. He gloatingly shouted to the goblins to keep squealing, for it only fueled him in this unrealistic battle with the monsters. The guy stated that this way he could scare them even more by demonstrating his incredible power and control over metal. He reminded the goblins that he had died from a stab in the back in his previous life, and they were trying to pull the same thing, but to no avail now. With fury in his eyes, he growled that if any more of the bastards attacked from behind, he would eat him alive without leaving a trace. He thought with satisfaction that he seemed to have managed to intimidate those mindless creeps enough that they had quieted down a bit at last. Lee Hyun-wook looked around at the defeated enemies and stated that it was now time to move on to the main course, meaning the boss of these monsters. He looked around carefully, trying to find the main enemy that was surely hiding somewhere nearby in this world of shadows. The boy wondered where this insidious boss monster, the leader of this entire bloodthirsty horde of goblins, could be hiding. Finally, a huge goblin shaman with a staff topped with skulls appeared out of the shadows, exuding a dark and ominous aura around him. Lee Hyun-wook noticed another glowing object on the ground and exclaimed happily that he would pick it up now, anticipating the new power. He realized that he had set himself up by bending over for the item, and the boss monster would surely not miss such an opportune moment to attack. The goblin shaman really didn't miss this chance and was already pulling his clawed paw towards the red crystal lying on the ground. Lee Hyun-wook was sure that this shaman was different from the other half-wits, and he wouldn't attack him directly himself right away. With a sly smile, he thought that everything was perfect. The victim was already in place and was about to show himself, caught in his clever trap. Lee Hyun-wook abruptly jumped back, creating sharp stone spikes from the ground to defend himself from the approaching enemy in this illusion world. These spikes pierced several goblins that tried to attack him while the others retreated, fearing the same horrible fate here. At this time at headquarters, the platoon commander sleepily asked if he had imagined it, or if the ground had really just shook under his feet. The other soldier frightenedly replied that he did, but the commander only threatened to kill him if he woke him up again over nonsense. The goblin shaman angrily roared that he had finally found him, Lee Hyun-wook, preparing to unleash all of his magical power and fury on him. The guy created a vortex of blue energy around him, directing it at the shaman, who deftly dodged this powerful attack in time. Lee Hyun-wook annoyingly exclaimed that it was his perfect shot, but the shaman was too agile for such a direct attack. He shouted at the shaman with a mad grin that he was a trap, asshole, and threw his glowing bayonet knife at him very quickly. The goblin shaman, who had not expected such insolence, managed to catch the knife flying at him, but it stabbed deeply into his chest. Lee Hyun-wook grinned gloatingly, noting that he had no words since he was able to grab his sword, and thought what a loser he was. He shouted furiously to the shaman to come down, for he had set a gang of goblins on him and promised to cut him to pieces. The boy realized it was a bluff on the shaman's part, and wondered what he should do in this difficult and dangerous situation on the battlefield. At this moment, the boss finally joined the fight, jumping down from his hiding place and stood at the head of the remaining goblins here. This event greatly boosted the morale of his minions, who rushed to attack the lone warrior with renewed fury. The system window warned Lee Hyun-wook that he was rapidly consuming mana and had less than 40% of his mana reserve left. He realized that what mattered most right now was his mana problem, and since things had turned out this way, he needed to act decisively. Lee Hyun-wook desperately shouted that if he couldn't eat the shaman, they would die together, and no matter how long it took, he would eat him. Suddenly, he heard Park Jun-mo's voice calling out to the corporal in surprise, not realizing what was going on in this chaos of battle around him. Lee Hyun-wook abruptly turned around after recognizing his coworker's voice and saw his frightened face among the fighting monsters in this world. Park Jun-mo cried out in horror, folding his arms in a mouthpiece and asking where Lee Hyun-wook was, having lost sight of him in the turmoil of the battle. The goblin shaman screamed in rage in an incomprehensible language, waving his staff and amulets, calling for help from the dark forces of this world. Sharp ice spikes erupted from the ground, rushing towards Park Jun-mo, who was terrified as he tried to dodge the enemy's deadly attack. Lee Hyun-wook shouted to his comrade to dodge while he himself rushed towards the huge goblin who swung his cleaver furiously. He deftly dodged the blow and jumped to kick the goblin in the chest, throwing him back and saving Park Jun-mo from certain death. At this moment, Park Jun-mo took advantage of the enemy's confusion and fired his rifle straight into the mouth of another attacking goblin. Lee Hyun-wook stood over the defeated body of his coworker, looking at the receding smoke from the scene of the fight, and realized that he was out of time. He thought bitterly that he had missed everything by failing to protect his comrade and prevent tragedy in this fictional battle again. With annoyance, he recognized that the goblin shaman had proven to be a very alert and cunning opponent who was able to outplay him in this fight. Suddenly, the commander's voice came over the radio, saying that he had heard shooting and demanded an immediate report on the situation at the post. Park Jun-mo, the survivor, reported in a trembling voice that their gate had opened and repeated that a gate had appeared in the post's territory. He reported that the monsters turned out to be goblins, and after the first skirmish they left, but kept silent about casualties, trying not to panic for nothing. The commander confirmed over the radio that there were no casualties, ordered them to stay put, stay in contact, and defend their post at all costs. Lee Hyun-wook gloomily thought that she would come soon, referring to someone very strong who was supposed to show up at the scene. HQ declared an emergency and a 5-minute alert as a portal had opened in their territory and reinforcements were needed. The paladin of the WSSBM, Lieutenant Seo Yoon-ha, a formidable warrior, appeared, ready to engage in battle with any spawns of other worlds at once. Lee Hyun-wook knew that if she came, just like in his previous life, she would close the gate and take all the valuable weapons all by herself. He remembered that there was a legendary level item here, which should belong to the army from now on, not to her personally. This legendary item was adamantium, the main artifact from his past life that made him nicknamed the Emperor of Steel back then. He realized that if he missed the chance to get it now, the next one would only come after a long 4 years in this world. And then, if he doesn't get adamantium, history will inevitably repeat itself, and he will die at the hands of traitors again, just like before. Lee Hyun-wook shouted with fury in his eyes that history would repeat itself, and he would take the adamantium first, not letting anyone beat him to it. He realized that he had to make it before the backup group arrived, for the goblins needed to sacrifice a human for some ritual. Park Jun-mo was pointing at something in a panic, asking what was going on and speculating if the goblins would suddenly show up in the center of town. Lee Hyun-wook calmly replied that goblins hunt in groups and the population density in the city was too high for them, and wondered where they were. Suddenly, there was a shout over the radio from Post 6 reporting a goblin attack, interrupted at the most disturbing part of that report. Gunshots could be heard in the distance, confirming that the 6th post was indeed engaged in a fierce battle with superior enemy forces now. Park Jun-mo grabbed the walkie-talkie and informed the 5th post that they would go to the aid of the 6th post without waiting for an order from the command here. Lee Hyun-wook sternly asked if they had not heard the order to stay at the post, and what he, the F rank, was going to do in such a situation. He grabbed the walkie-talkie, starting to say whether Park Jun-mo wanted to be finished off, but he managed to snatch the transmitter out of his hands. Park Jun-mo shouted, "No," claiming that they definitely won't just be restricted from traveling. It will be enough for a court-martial. He explained that the sixth post had either archers or mages fighting at long range, and they wouldn't be able to stand up to the goblins. Park Jun-mo asked in desperation that Lee Hyun-wook alone would be able to change, calling him a corporal, not believing in his strength at this moment. Lee Hyun-wook confidently pointed his finger at him and said that he's not alone. Park Jun-mo will go on this dangerous mission with him together. Park Jun-mo fell silent, dumbfounded by this turn of events, and Lee Hyun-wook asked if the man had heard what he had just said to him. A shout came from Namsan Tower that they should help the sixth post and that Corporal Kim Jong-ok had been badly wounded in the battle with the enemy. The commander radioed that the response team had advanced to Post 6 and ordered them to defend the area at the cost of their lives there. A horde of goblins were furiously attacking the small fortified post, trying to break in and wipe out any remaining defenders now. Inside the post, one of the soldiers asked the wounded Corporal Kim in horror if he was okay, seeing his grave condition and the wounds on his body. The wounded corporal gritted his teeth, doubting their barrier would hold for long, and wondered with despair when the hell help would come. Suddenly everything went quiet, and one of the soldiers asked in surprise why it was suddenly so quiet, not understanding the reason for the lull in the battle. The goblin shaman swung his staff, and sharp green spikes erupted from the ground, rushing towards the small fortified post of soldiers now. Stone rained down on the booth, destroying it and leaving the soldiers no chance of escape in this fictional world around them. The two soldiers recoiled in horror from the shattered windows, screaming what the hell was going on, not understanding the source of this sudden attack here. One of them whispered in despair that it was a boss monster, realizing that their small squad was facing an incredibly strong opponent now. He pictured with horror how the goblins would destroy the post, deal with them, carry their bodies to the altar, and rip out their hearts while they were still alive. Another soldier, gritting his teeth, asked what they were doing, and added grimly that ending his life now would be much more painless here. Park Jun-mo tearfully shouted into the radio that the sixth post, they would help them, and ordered them to prepare to fire, aiming for the light. He added to have them use the fire ability, repeating the order to aim for light and apply fire attacks for maximum damage. Lee Hyun-wook, aiming his rifle, thought that it would take a whole group of shooters of his level to resist this enemy. The soldier with the fire ability complained that he couldn't see anything and asked where he should aim in this impenetrable darkness around him. Amidst the stone rain, a bright light suddenly flashed, and the soldier hesitantly wondered if that was where he needed to direct his attack now. Lee Hyun-wook, standing on the shoulder of the huge goblin, pointed at the light and loudly ordered the soldier to aim at that particular bright spot immediately. He resolutely stated that he would control the trigger himself, directing his comrade's fiery attack at the target he needed now. The soldier with the crossbow exclaimed in surprise that he was moving, not realizing how Lee Hyun-wook was controlling his weapon at such a distance here. The fiery arrow fired from the crossbow flew precisely at the target, lighting up the night sky and bringing death to one of the monsters now. As the arrow flew through the rain of stone, it hit the eye of a huge goblin, who collapsed to the ground with a roar of pain and rage. A powerful explosion shook the surroundings as the fiery arrow reached its target, destroying the monster and scattering around its remains here. The system window informed Lee Hyun-wook that he had used up only 1% of his mana, and he noted with satisfaction that the consumption had become more moderate. The stone rain summoned by the shaman continued to fall on the ground, but now it was less intense and no longer as dangerous. Lee Hyun-wook, thrown back by the blast wave, fell to the ground, but immediately jumped up, ready to continue the battle with the remaining enemies now. The soldier with the crossbow, still in shock, heard Lee Hyun-wook's order to reload immediately and prepare for the next shot. He hastily replied, "That's right." And as he reloaded his crossbow, he heard the command to aim for the light as soon as it was fully ready. The goblin shaman stood atop a cliff, surveying the battlefield and preparing to unleash a new wave of his destructive magic on the soldiers. Park Jun-mo, hiding in the bushes, lamented that he was just a simple private and didn't understand how he could find the boss in this turmoil. He thought that even if he found the boss, once he sent the signal, he would immediately be finished off by the enemies, leaving him no chance of survival. Suddenly, he saw the battlefield lit up with many flashes of fire, and he exclaimed in surprise, not believing his eyes at this moment. He remembered that the corporal had said as if he would distract them, but now it seemed to him that Lee Hyun-wook himself was planning to slaughter all the monsters alone. Suddenly, a goblin with a spear jumped out at him from the bushes, taking him by surprise and leaving him no time to react or retaliate. The glowing spear pierced through the goblin, and it collapsed to the ground with a surprised roar before it could harm Park Jun-mo now. Lee Hyun-wook appeared out of nowhere, saving his comrade, and pointed at the other goblin, preparing another attack with his deadly blade. A fiery explosion shattered the next monster into pieces, while Park Jun-mo was still unable to recover from the horror and shock he had experienced. He muttered fearfully, "That's right," and promised to return to his position now, still not believing the miracle that had happened to him. The goblin shaman wondered if this was the same Corporal Lee Hyun-wook he knew, for his strength had clearly increased manifold. He looked angrily at Lee Hyun-wook and mentally said that he had proven himself enough, and now it was time for them to fight. Lee Hyun-wook looked at the system window and calmly asked if it was time for him to leave, as if he was waiting for some special sign or command. The system window warned him that he was using up mana very quickly, and he only had 12% of his mana reserve left, which was dangerous. He gritted his teeth, wondering if this creep wanted him to wait until he had used up all his mana and his subordinates were destroyed. Suddenly, there was a desperate cry from Park Jun-mo, who was calling for the corporal and begging him to save him after falling into another death trap of the enemy. Lee Hyun-wook was next to the shaman who was holding Park Jun-mo hostage, and the latter apologized for doing as ordered. The guy gracefully swung his hand, creating a vortex of blue energy blades, preparing to attack the shaman and save his comrade immediately. The goblin shaman grinned sinisterly, looming over Park Jun-mo, who cried out in horror, unable to move out of fear and despair. The shaman's eyes flashed with rage, and he let out a battle cry in his incomprehensible language, preparing to sacrifice the soldier to the dark gods. Lee Hyun-wook, surrounded by goblins, calmly called out to Park Jun-mo as if nothing was happening and prepared for a decisive fight here. Park Jun-mo reached out to his corporal with despair, realizing that because of him, Lee Hyun-wook was in such a dangerous situation right now. Two huge goblins with cleavers swung at the defenseless soldier, preparing to chop him to pieces at the command of their evil shaman. Lee Hyun-wook pointed at the shaman with an icy smile and uttered, "Checkmate," anticipating his swift and inevitable victory over the enemy. He snapped his fingers, and the glowing blue flame fuse on Park Jun-mo's walkie-talkie activated, ready to explode at any moment here. A powerful explosion went off as the walkie-talkie exploded right in the goblin shaman's hands, tearing him apart and showering everything around him with sparks. Lee Hyun-wook reached for the falling Park Jun-mo in a desperate leap, trying to save him from imminent death after that explosion here. Park Jun-mo, falling to the ground, assured his corporal that he was fine, although he was quite scared by the events that had happened now. Lee Hyun-wook grinned gloatingly and wished himself a pleasant appetite, preparing to devour the shaman's remains and get his power for himself. He easily dodged the attack of the huge clawed monster that was trying to stop him from enjoying his well-deserved prey here. The boy was surprised to notice that his blade bounced off the monster's leather armor, doing no harm in this fight. The system window warned him again about the rapid consumption of mana, which was only 9% left, which was critically low right now. He rushed upward, dodging attacks, and wondered with bewilderment why the monster only covered his back, leaving other areas open. Suddenly, a new portal opened in the distance, and a bright light poured out of it, heralding the arrival of even stronger and more dangerous enemies here. Lee Hyun-wook shouted, "Gate!" in horror, realizing that the situation was becoming increasingly critical and he needed to act quickly and decisively. He shouted, "No!" in desperation, rushing toward the closing portal, trying to get there in time to grab what he so desperately needed to survive. His hand almost touched the portal, but it finally closed, leaving him with nothing and robbing him of his last hope for salvation now. Lee Hyun-wook whispered, "Steal?" in despair as he looked at his hands, and the system window showed that he only had 7% mana left. Lee Hyun-wook clenched his fist, and the remaining mana, only 4%, concentrated around the claw necklace around the neck of the goblin shaman now. Rapidly expending the last 2% of his mana, he used his energy whip to pull the defeated but still alive shaman towards him. "Enough, just let me," he growled, using up the last 1% of his mana, and prepared for the final action of this battle. Lee Hyun-wook fiercely sunk his teeth into the shaman's neck while shouting, "Eat!" and began to absorb his essence to restore his strength and power. The system window mercilessly reported that his mana had run out and he had 0% left. He was completely exhausted at this moment here. He was breathing heavily, realizing that he had the skills with him, but his body was still as weak as it had been in the past and he urgently needed to train. Suddenly, the night sky lit up with a bright flash like fireworks, and Park Jun-mo whispered in awe that it was divine light. A group of heavily armed soldiers led by Lieutenant Seo Yoon-ha appeared from the forest, and Lee Hyun-wook grimly muttered, "Damnation," to himself. He realized that she was here, the same WSSBM paladin who had taken adamantium from him in a past life, and history could repeat itself. Lee Hyun-wook looked around in desperation, asking where it was, that precious artifact, and begged for it to appear before it was too late. He saw a glowing purple crystal stuck in the chest of a dead goblin, and one of the soldiers shouted happily that they had found the gate. Two soldiers from Seo Yun-ha's group pointed their weapons at him, ordering him to put his hands up and not to move, or else they would shoot to kill. One of them sternly demanded that he identify himself, stating his rank and name, giving him no time to think or resist now. Lee Hyun-wook, struggling to get up and still stained with blood and the remains of the shaman, weakly introduced himself as Corporal Lee Hyun-wook then. The soldiers reported that they had found the injured man and ordered them to carry the stretcher here while Seo Yun-ha examined the closing portal at this place. She stated that since the gate was open, it meant that the enemies were still here and they needed to be on guard, ready for another attack at any moment. Seo Yun-ha was surprised to think, were three ordinary soldiers really able to defeat a monster boss, not believing such an incredible possibility here? She carefully examined the dead goblin's body and shook her head, answering, "No," realizing that something was not as immediately apparent here. Noticing that all the defeated goblins had the same wounds, she concluded that it was the work of one very strong man. As the soldiers carried Lee Hyun-wook away on a stretcher, Seo Yun-ha looked at them thoughtfully, trying to solve the mystery of this strange battle. The system window congratulated Lee Hyun-wook for absorbing the legendary item, adamantium, but warned that the assimilation of the metal was delayed here. He covered his eyes tiredly with his hand, and the system informed him that the metal he was assimilating was enchanted, and his magical abilities would increase. Seo Yun-ha looked at the carried Lee Hyun-wook in bewilderment and thought why he was laughing at such a moment, not understanding his joy. The system congratulated him, reporting the appearance of the rare skill of detecting all metals after consuming the legendary item here. Lee Hyun-wook thought triumphantly that adamantium was finally his while. Seo Yun-ha noticed the two goblins fleeing from the sixth post. He felt the ability to sense the response of all the metals around him, realizing that today was the day his power would return in full again. With a crazed smile and a clenched fist, he realized that the Great Steel Emperor had truly returned, ready to change his fate now. A few days after the gate incident, rumors spread around the base that the same F-ranker turned out to be the real truth-teller back then. Two girl soldiers from the 3rd Brigade were discussing what had happened, with one of them claiming that she had been told this by a direct participant in the events. She excitedly recounted how the others were just waiting to die, when suddenly a corporal with a big sword appeared and cut all the goblins there. Another girl thought it was some kind of fantasy and complained that the atmosphere in the platoon just sucked because of these rumors. Sergeant Oh Sang-guk, the 2nd platoon commander, expressed doubt whether they really wanted him to believe this unspeakable bullshit now. One of the soldiers fearfully muttered confirmation of the rumor's veracity, but another immediately shushed him, urging him to be quiet and not to argue. The sergeant walked up to the offending soldier and pointed out with a sneer that he had not responded to his salute, and he was already putting his hand down. Private Pak An-il, a guard of the 6th Guard Post, fearfully reported full obedience, not daring to disobey the formidable sergeant. Oh Sang-guk mockingly turned to the other soldier, calling him a future ace, clearly not believing in his abilities and capabilities in the future here. Private Lee Won-seok, a D-rank barbarian, confusedly objected about the impossibility of such a thing, for he couldn't have torn apart 3 goblins with his bare hands. Sergeant Oh Sang-guk said the question thoughtfully, adding that he hadn't seen them defeat the boss himself, and it was more logical to think of outside help. He grimly continued his thought that if an F-ranker became arrogant and broke military discipline, it would be very bad. With a sinister smirk, Oh Sang-guk declared that such a thing was unacceptable and that he intended to find a way to put the upstart in his place. Lee Hyun-wook entered the battalion commander's office with a loud greeting, ready for any turn of events in this difficult time now. He reported Corporal Lee Hyun-wook's arrival as ordered, standing at attention in front of the high command, awaiting further instructions here. The boy thought grimly about the fact that it had ended well, though, and they could turn a blind eye to his misbehavior, wondering about the reason for the summons. Lieutenant Seo Yun-ha, the formidable black paladin and B-rank player, her gaze radiated steely determination. She was accompanied by Lieutenant Lee Min-hee, a C-rank mage wizard specializing in dangerous space distortions. The harsh voice of the battalion commander, amplified by the scar on his face, began the interrogation, finding out if the soldier had disobeyed orders. It was Lieutenant Col Kim Kang-seok, the famous B-rank druid, who clarified whether the corporal had indeed single-handedly repelled the attack. Corporal Lee Hyun-wook froze, realizing that a wrong answer would send him to be court-martialed, and he urgently needed to set things right. He confirmed his report of the gate opening, but the commander coldly remarked that he never understood the corporal's true motives. The lieutenant colonel stiffly cut off that a common soldier of his rank would usually just be torn apart by monsters without a chance. Lee Hyun-wook felt an icy pressure, realizing that it was impossible to retreat, because his entire army career was at stake. With unexpected audacity and a slight chuckle, the corporal stated that the commander's words made him feel humiliated. He even boldly suggested that the commander was deceiving him, which elicited a surprised question of, "Deceiving?" from the lieutenant colonel himself. Lieutenant Lee Min-hee immediately boiled up with righteous anger, furiously questioning how dare the corporal speak to the commander like that. However, the battalion commander stopped the lieutenant with an imperious gesture, asking Lee Hyun-wook with piercing interest as to why. Lee Hyun-wook jumped at the chance and enthusiastically reminded them that the commander always emphasized what was important to them. The corporal pressed to clarify if the commander remembered what he was on, causing Lieutenant Colonel Kim Kang-seok to think deeply for a moment. Lee Hyun-wook pathosely quoted the commander's fiery words from the podium that even an E-rank player would defeat trolls. Lieutenant Seo Yoon-ha listened intently as Corporal Lee Hyun-wook confidently explained that he was quite capable of defeating the goblin. He honestly admitted to the commander that he had disobeyed the order, but only because otherwise everyone on Post 6 would inevitably die. Inwardly, Lee Hyun-wook was triumphant, realizing that he had brought an irresistible argument, and his ghostly shadow smirked approvingly. Now, he slyly decided, was the time to press his emotions, remembering the commander's speech about the soldiers' lack of rank. Lee Hyun-wook completed his defense with zeal, stating that this was what the commander had taught him, and he, as a loyal soldier, had done so. The corporal eagerly continued that he used tactics from training, risking his life for strategy and comradeship despite the taunts. He explained that only believing in the words of the commander who laid down his thinking helped him, and the commander's doubts devalued everything. That was why he felt cheated, remembering how the gate had started to open when Kim Kang-seok had just become a lieutenant. The story went on to say that the commander then almost died in a brutal fight with the terrible orcs, barely surviving the battle. Despite the mortal danger, he did not hesitate to return to the army ranks, ready to stand up again in defense of his country. The corporal concluded with a sly smirk that the commander, having been one of the first members of the USSBM, was a true soldier to the core. He recalled that he had believed the commander's words, risked his life for his comrades, and now the commander could not just send him to trial. The commander, whose shadow loomed over the corporal, placed his hands on his shoulders, thoughtfully letting him know that he now caught his faith. Suddenly, the battalion commander loudly announced the promotion of Lee Hyun-wook to the rank of junior sergeant, causing the corporal to freeze in amazement. Lieutenant Colonel Kim Kang-seok, surrounded by flashes of lightning, confirmed his incredible decision with formidable determination and strength in his voice. Immediately, a system window appeared, congratulating him for internalizing metal and gaining the brand new ability, Steel Physique. Lieutenant Lee Min-hee was completely shocked, disbelievingly letting out an exclamation of surprise, and Lieutenant Seo Yoon-ha covered her face with her hand. Lee Hyun-wook couldn't believe his ears, confusedly wondering if he had misheard while looking at the tattered Korean flag. The action moved to the buzzing training room of the 3rd Brigade of the 1st Battalion, where soldiers were hard at work training. Lee Hyun-wook, lifting the heavy barbell in the gym with incredible difficulty, mentally reprimanded as he felt all his muscles tense up. He lamented to himself that in trying so hard to avoid guard duty, he had gotten himself into more trouble. Lieutenant Lee Min-hee protested vehemently, loudly arguing to the commander that it was impossible for an F-ranked player to be promoted to the rank of junior sergeant. Lee Hyun-wook reflected that platoon leader Lee Min-hee's violent protests had given him some time, though he would have preferred to remain inconspicuous. Sergeant Oh Sang-guk approached him in the hall with an acidic smirk, lazily inquiring if he needed a bench press anymore. Lee Hyun-wook turned around abruptly, his gaze full of cold fury, mutely questioning the insolent sergeant about his intentions. Sergeant Oh Sang-guk wryly remarked that if the most famous person lifts such ridiculous weights, it puts their unit to shame. The surrounding soldiers looked at each other perplexedly, not understanding the nature of the altercation between Lee Hyun-wook and Oh Sang-guk. Lee Hyun-wook silently watched as Sergeant Oh Sang-guk and his underlings scornfully laughed at him from the sidelines. Inwardly, Lee Hyun-wook thought that Sergeant Oh Sang-guk with his pathetic dumbbell was just a pathetic lowlife. He remembered the past bullying and realized that he could not let Oh Sang-guk bully him with impunity again. Lee Hyun-wook angrily grabbed his head, because he had just decided not to draw too much attention to himself. With sudden calmness, he told Oh Sang-guk that he had come on time, for his mood was terrible. Suddenly, Lee Hyun-wook, full of determination, gave Oh Sang-guk a daring challenge, suggesting that they fight immediately. The excited shouts of the soldiers spread throughout the barracks, announcing the fight between future ace Lee Won-seok and this F-ranked. Lee Hyun-wook and Oh Sang-guk were already standing in the center of the octagonal ring, surrounded by a dense crowd of curious soldiers. Oh Sang-guk smirked evilly, anticipating how he would teach that impudent upstart Lee Hyun-wook a good lesson. The sergeant lunged forward with a powerful punch, but Lee Hyun-wook seemed to easily dodge or block it. Suddenly, there was a surprised exclamation from an officer who couldn't believe that Choi Yoon-chun had gone on vacation. Two officers were excitedly discussing the joyous news of a soldier with the talent of a holy swordsman. Lieutenant Lee Min-hee excitedly reported to the ensign that there was also a fellow barbarian who was being called a future ace. The stern-looking warrant officer Choi Myung-ho, an instructor of the elite Black Tiger Special Forces, whose information was secret, appeared. Lieutenant Lee Min-hee ingratiatingly suggested that Warrant Officer Choi Myung-ho, since he was here, take a look at something interesting. Meanwhile, in the ring, Lee Hyun-wook blocked another furious punch from his opponent with incredible agility. Oh Sang-guk looked shocked and exhausted, while Lee Hyun-wook calmly stood opposite, waiting for the fight to continue. Lieutenant Lee Min-hee enthusiastically pointed the ensign to the ring as if it had been set up especially for him. Lieutenant Lee Min-hee asked the opinion of Warrant Officer Choi Myung-ho with interest, who thoughtfully noted the fighter's impressive technique in the ring. However, Warrant Officer Choi Myung-ho immediately clarified skeptically, "What's the point of the technique if a fighter can't hit his opponent?" Lieutenant Lee Min-hee eagerly assured that the fighter lacked only experience, but his blow would be fatal, to which the ensign doubted. One of the spectators shouted furiously at Lee Won-seok, accusing him of a giveaway and demanding that he immediately gather his strength for the fight. Oh Sang-guk's other fans picked up the shouting, resenting if the sparring was a joke for him. After all, they had placed bets on him. Oh Sang-guk mentally reprimanded himself, not understanding the accusation of a giveaway, as his entire body suddenly felt incredibly heavy and stiff. Lee Hyun-wook stealthily used his ability, for his secret control over metal allowed him to influence his opponent stealthily. Oh Sang-guk's legs suddenly seemed to be bogged down in liquid metal, making his every movement agonizingly slow and incredibly heavy. Oh Sang-guk was terrified and couldn't understand what the hell was happening to his body, feeling a growing panic and utter helplessness. Lee Hyun-wook easily dodged the attacks, as his unique ability made Oh Sang-guk feel like fighting in a viscous swamp. Oh Sang-guk shouted in panic that something wrong was happening to his legs, to which Lee Hyun-wook was nonchalantly and sarcastically surprised. Lee Hyun-wook asked Oh Sang-guk with a wry chuckle, wondering if it was because things weren't going according to plan. Oh Sang-guk was furious, calling Lee Hyun-wook a disgusting low-ranking brat for such an insolent humiliation. Out of anger, Oh Sang-guk unleashed all of his hidden power on Lee Hyun-wook, enveloped in a frightening berserk battle aura. Oh Sang-guk activated the body enhancement, entering the dangerous berserk mode, and his figure became even more massive and much more terrifying. Warrant Officer Choi Myung-ho seriously noted that the body reinforcement turned the sparring into something more, and the opponent didn't even flinch. He was becoming more and more fascinated by the fight, which reminded him of a fierce confrontation between an enraged buffalo and a cunning leopard hiding its claws. Warrant Officer Choi Myung-ho watched with genuine interest, while Lieutenant Lee Min-hee enthusiastically kept saying that D-rank Lee Won-seok was incredible. Oh Sang-guk, completely gripped by berserk rage, roared at Lee Hyun-wook that he would finish him off right here and now without any mercy. With inhuman strength, Oh Sang-guk unleashed a crushing blow on Lee Hyun-wook, who seemed to have no chance to resist. The audience enthusiastically cheered Lee Won-seok, noting his clear superiority and confirming that he was not called a future ace for nothing. Oh Sang-guk in astonishment could not understand what had happened, for his blow felt as if he had struck a steel door with his bare fist. Suddenly, a system notification appeared, announcing the D-rank steel physique ability that temporarily strengthened a body part for mana. Lee Hyun-wook smirked gloatingly, for his new ability Steel Physique was indeed turning parts of his body into solid steel. He defiantly shouted to Oh Sang-guk that he would take revenge and urged the latter, calling him a pig, to continue the offensive and attack again. Oh Sang-guk roared in indescribable rage, calling Lee Hyun-wook a stupid F-rank brat, unable to contain his righteous anger. Enraged, Oh Sang-guk lunged forward again, but Lee Hyun-wook dodged his clumsy punch with deceptive ease. Lee Hyun-wook thought that it would be foolish to waste such a valuable ability on this opponent. However, he decided to still act. He decided that for scumbags like Oh Sang-guk who boast of strength, a showy beating would be the best medicine and lesson. Lee Hyun-wook dealt a crushing blow, thinking that for the arrogant rascals who were making a fool of themselves, such a punishment was simply necessary. He was quite sure that this brutal beating had served as an excellent and highly effective cure for Oh Sang-guk's hubris. Oh Sang-guk collapsed to the ring floor in a shapeless heap, and there was a stunned, tense silence among all the spectators. Warrant Officer Choi Myung-ho noted to himself with a faint chuckle that this guy Lee Hyun-wook had finally shown his sharp fangs. He, like a predatory leopard, had a dead grip on his buffalo opponent's throat, for a true beast never let go of its prey. Warrant Officer mentally urged him not to weaken the onslaught for a second, and make the enemy literally suffocate from powerlessness and defeat. However, Oh Sang-guk, gathering his last remaining strength, suddenly grabbed Lee Hyun-wook by the throat, lifting him high and mightily above the ground. Oh Sang-guk, with a face contorted with rage and pain, wheezed that he didn't know what tricks he was using, but it wouldn't help him. With a desperate cry, he tried to crush Lee Hyun-wook, urging him to die, but the latter reacted lightning fast, retaking the initiative. Oh Sang-guk realized with horror that he had been caught in an incredible and completely unexpected flying armbar pain technique. The warrant officer noted that if Oh Sang-guk's punch had reached its target, he would have broken his arm, admitting that the buffalo's instincts worked better. He wondered if a normal player would never be able to defeat a barbarian with enhancements, and began to wonder if he had overestimated him. Oh Sang-guk held onto his grip with his last strength, growling with exertion as he watched the man desperately fighting for life. Oh Sang-guk howled in pain, crying out against his fingers as Lee Hyun-wook held his face with a dead grip, causing unbearable suffering. Lee Hyun-wook delivered a lightning-fast and masterful crushing underhook, sending the huge Oh Sang-guk collapsing heavily to the ring floor. As Oh Sang-guk fell, Lee Hyun-wook smoothly transitioned into a chokehold from behind, taking his massive opponent by surprise. Warrant Officer Choi Myung-ho mentally approved the action, noting that the body reinforcement only acted on the muscles, leaving the carotid artery vulnerable. Oh Sang-guk angrily hissed a curse at the petty Lee Hyun-wook, desperately thinking only of how to throw him off. The system window reminded again of the D-rank steel body ability, which absorbs 5 mana points to temporarily strengthen the body. Oh Sang-guk panicked, realizing with horror that all of his monstrous strength was not enough to unclench Lee Hyun-wook's steely hands. A critical system warning suddenly flashed, informing Lee Hyun-wook that he was using the steel physique beyond the limits available to him. Despite the threatening warning, Lee Hyun-wook only tensed up more, and a blue glow enveloped his body as he tightened his grip. A new notice of possible harm to the body appeared, and at the same time, one of the soldiers excitedly asked the sergeant to stop their fight. Lee Hyun-wook, with a bloodied face and steely determination in his gaze, focused all his will on Oh Sang-guk as if giving him a message. He thought that this cruel lesson should be enough for Oh Sang-guk, watching as he began to lose consciousness. With his fading consciousness, Oh Sang-guk couldn't believe that he, so strong, was actually losing to this lowly F-ranked loser. His last thought before falling into darkness was the all-consuming horror of imminent disgrace before all witnesses. The words about future ace mockingly flashed through his clouded mind as he finally passed out, his pride trampled. Suddenly, Oh Sang-guk's body erupted with a second, even more powerful wave of berserk rage, and his muscles swelled monstrously. The ensign was amazed that Oh Sang-guk had used the reinforcement twice, but realized that without the release of the chokehold, it was the end. The ensign tensely watched the desperate fight, wondering which of the two fighters was the real predator. In a final desperate tug, Oh Sang-guk threw himself and Lee Hyun-wook backward with force, bringing them crashing to the floor with a thud. Warrant Officer Choi Myung-ho's face lit up with a satisfied, almost predatory grin as he recognized Lee Hyun-wook as a true, indomitable fighter. Lee Hyun-wook, standing over the defeated Oh Sang-guk, looked like a true beast, surrounded by the aura of an enraged, glowing leopard. At night, someone excitedly called out to the defeated Oh Sang-guk outside the barracks, anxiously wondering if he was all right. The soldiers were relieved to find that Oh Sang-guk was breathing, just passed out, but were now puzzling over how to turn him over. Private Park Jung-mo enthusiastically greeted Sergeant Lee Hyun-wook, gleefully shouting that he had always had unwavering faith in his victory. Park Jun-mo anxiously asked if the winner was injured, but Lee Hyun-wook brushed it off, muttering that he wasn't really worried. Warrant Officer Choi Myung-ho turned sternly to Lee Hyun-wook, imperiously demanding his name, causing the latter to be visibly confused. Lee Hyun-wook, recognizing the formidable Warrant Officer Choi Myung-ho, saluted clearly, confidently introducing himself as a junior sergeant of the 1st Platoon. Warrant Officer Choi Myung-ho introduced himself as a Black Tiger instructor, noting that he was very impressed with their exciting sparring. Then the ensign, holding out a dark business card to Lee Hyun-wook, unexpectedly offered him to participate in a special operation. The surrounding soldiers were shocked to the core, for it was about the legendary and incredibly elite Black Tiger Association. The coworkers couldn't believe that the warrant officer had suggested that the F rank join a better grouping, thinking it absurd. Lee Hyun-wook politely apologized to the ensign, humbly reminding him that he only possessed a paltry F rank of player. Warrant Officer Choi Myung-ho countered that ranks were only needed to distinguish ordinary people, and they needed a fighter like him. Lee Hyun-wook mentally cursed as his ghostly shadow howled in annoyance, for everyone around him already had their eyes on him. The ensign pointed out that the army is a very closed place, again insisting on offering a card and hinting at great opportunities. Lee Hyun-wook, thankful for the kindness, took the card, pondering that he would definitely get caught one day if he continued to get into skirmishes. Deciding to keep the necessary distance for now, Lee Hyun-wook replied that he would think about his proposal and politely said goodbye. Later, in his office, Battalion Commander Kim Kang-seok asked the ensign how their Black Tigers were doing. Warrant Officer Choi Myung-ho, leisurely sipping his tea, calmly replied that, in general, they were catastrophically short of men as usual. Commander Kim Kang-seok grinned understandingly, for the guilds were now taking even the C rankers that the army had worked so hard to raise. Battalion Commander Kim Kang-seok asked with a smile if Sergeant Choi Yoon-chun was the reason Warrant Officer Choi Myung-ho came to him. Ensign Choi Myung-ho confirmed that this was true, but laughingly added that he had heard the big news about him from others. He reported that Sergeant Choi Yoon-chun appeared to be on a long-awaited vacation right now, much to his slight disappointment. Thanks to this circumstance, however, the ensign, with a sly glint in the reflection of the cup, noticed another very interesting soldier. Commander Kim Kang-seok, sternly crossing his arms over his chest, questioned with obvious doubt as to whether that soldier was really that interesting. Meanwhile, Private Park Jun-mo ran after Lee Hyun-wook, desperately shouting his name and trying to catch up while running. The battalion commander gave orders over the phone, demanding to urgently find out everything about Sergeant Lee Hyun-wook's life before he enlisted. Private Park Jun-mo clung to Lee Hyun-wook and begged him to teach him how to become stronger, to which he irritably asked him to back off. Park Jun-mo said admiringly that he wanted to be like the sergeant, but Lee Hyun-wook brushed it off, pointing out his fatigue. The commander confirmed the order over the phone, deciding with satisfaction that they would do exactly as he had planned to do. The battalion commander, standing at the window, mentally addressed Lee Hyun-wook, warning him not to blame him for his troubles. With a sinister smile, he concluded that it was solely because of the incredible greed that Lee Hyun-wook had awakened in everyone around him. The scene abruptly changed to the busy Itaewon Street, where many people were hurrying about their business under the city's evening sky. Outside, the boy noticed a strange dark figure jumping out from around a corner, resembling a small, nimble monkey with a tail. The boy shouted curiously, pointing to the fleeing creature, and ran after it, shouting the word monkey after it. He rounded the corner, continuing to call for the monkey, but stopped suddenly when he heard a quiet but threatening voice behind him. A vicious, rat-like creature in a ragged cloak and long tail appeared out of the darkness, clearly unfriendly. The boy whispered in horror, not believing his eyes if it was a monkey, his voice trembling with the deadly fear that was approaching. Out of the gaping portal came a horde of similarly creepy rat-like monsters, armed with pickaxes and ready to attack. Lee Hyun-wook and Lieutenant Seo Yoon-ha entered the battalion's spacious armory where a variety of weapons and equipment were stored. Lieutenant Seo Yoon-ha informed Lee Hyun-wook that the battalion commander had recognized his merit by giving him time off and the right to choose his own weapon. Lee Hyun-wook remembered that his platoon leader had been very arrogant in his previous life as well, thinking it was just a feature of his personality. He tossed aside the piece of tarp thoughtfully, pondering aloud whether the lieutenant's belief or disbelief mattered, for it was all in the past. Lieutenant Seo Yoon-ha stared at him silently, pondering his strange and overly confident behavior in this situation. With the piercing gaze of her turquoise eyes, she coldly remarked that Lee Hyun-wook seemed like an overconfident person. She pointed out that judging by the goblin wounds at the gate, he had single-handedly stopped the first wave, wondering if such a thing was possible. Lee Hyun-wook confidently raised the wooden blade covered by the green cloth and firmly stated that he was taking this particular simple weapon. Lieutenant Seo Yun-ha advised him not to take anything since she had him cornered, and to choose a normal weapon, but he insisted. A system window suddenly appeared, describing the item as a cloud blade capable of absorbing water and creating a wet mist. Lee Hyun-wook remembered that although the blade seemed useless, in the future, Sergeant Choi Yoon-chun had become famous with it as a holy swordsman. The true name of the blade was the Dark Hand of the Cloudmaster, referring to the ancient myths of the three weather gods and their followers. These gods were the master of the wind, the master of the rain, and the master of the clouds, whose hands, according to legends, were called the Hands of Darkness. Hands of Darkness could also be interpreted as blades hidden among the clouds, which belonged to the mighty god of thunder. Lee Hyun-wook understood that once he unleashed the full power of the blade, he would be able to use lightning to sweep the dungeons, and steel and lightning were invincible. He firmly declared that this time the blade would go to him, and to the lieutenant's remark on his modesty replied that he was satisfied with everything. Lee Hyun-wook added that he has absolutely no time to choose any other more suitable weapon from the available arsenal. Suddenly, a siren howled, and an alarming announcement of a new gate opening in Itaewon in the pouring rain echoed through the base. Soldiers ran panicked around the barracks as the loudspeaker continued to repeat the emergency message about the threat in Itaewon. Lieutenant Seo Yun-ha was surprised to notice that Lee Hyun-wook was not surprised at all, but remained calm as if he had expected it. Two knights in shining armor were already standing on the night street of Itaewon, blocking the passage for the unsuspecting civilians. The soldiers looked at the Blue Flower Guild knights with admiration, noting that they were probably sent as reinforcements to the gate. They discussed the impressive designer armor and weapons of the knights, realizing that such equipment cost a fortune on the market. One of the soldiers dreamed that if he sold all the knights' equipment, he could buy a building in Kanama and would be transferred there after his service. Lee Hyun-wook lined up his soldiers, who took turns calling out their numbers until "Sixth, the reckoning is over," sounded. He instructed the squad that this time kobolds were coming out of the gate, which, though small, were dangerous with needles and gas. Some of the soldiers tried to roll up their sleeves, but Lee Hyun-wook immediately and sternly ordered them to leave this violation of the regulations. One of the privates questioned the need for such serious preparation, naively believing that the kobolds would not get to them. Lee Hyun-wook stiffly cut off that this wasn't a drill and asked if the man would like the kobold to pluck his eyes out alive. The soldier fearfully muttered, "No way, no," and Lee Hyun-wook ordered everyone to immediately check their gas masks for emergencies. Two soldiers from another squad suddenly appeared, commenting derisively that even pathetic squads were having their own meetings. These soldiers armed with axes looked disdainfully at Lee Hyun-wook's squad, which consisted of low-level unskilled players. Lee Hyun-wook sternly addressed one of the scoffers, warning that there were a lot of kobolds fleeing from the Red Territory, the evacuation zone. The mocker, clearly not taking the threat seriously, dismissively waved it away, muttering something about Hyun-wook taking care of himself. Lee Hyun-wook glanced at him coldly, mentally noting that he wasn't the kind of low-level trash to be handing out advice to him. He calmly stated that his job was only to warn, to which the other soldier sarcastically muttered something about the commander. Lee Hyun-wook abruptly ordered his squad to come to their senses, seeing their confusion after being bullied by the other soldiers. He eagerly reminded them that they had heard this sort of thing many times before, but that they were now on a real battlefield and should not lose heart. The soldiers, encouraged by his words, shouted, "That's right!" in a friendly and loud manner, their morale visibly raised by his speech. Lee Hyun-wook explained that kobolds are small, so they need to install motion sensors in sewers and other narrow passageways. He gave them only 20 minutes to complete the task, loudly ordering them to depart immediately and act as lively as possible. Lee Hyun-wook summoned Park Jun-mo, who immediately responded readily to the sergeant's order by raising his hand in greeting. The two soldiers installing the sensors noticed that their sergeant was unusually agitated today and looked very serious. One of the soldiers turned to Lee Hyun-wook with a smile, nonchalantly asking what was wrong and why he was so tense. Lee Hyun-wook suddenly felt a chilling prick in his neck, and his eyes widened in horror as he realized the threat looming over him. The kobold's poison needle stabbed straight into his neck, and the searing pain instantly paralyzed him, causing him to freeze in place. Huge green spikes suddenly burst out from the ground, knocking back one of the soldiers and nearly piercing Lee Hyun-wook and Park Jun-mo. The green, poisonous gas quickly enveloped the street, and the soldiers began to fall one by one, suffocating from the deadly fumes. Panicked soldiers in gas masks screamed desperately about the poisonous gas, trying to warn the others of the danger and escape. A horde of enraged kobolds burst out of the mist, attacking the defenseless soldiers, and screams of terror mingled with the sound of gunfire. Lee Hyun-wook fell to the ground, and the vicious clawed paw of the kobold loomed over him, ready to deliver a deadly crushing blow. The horrifying face of a kobold shaman wearing a ritual mask adorned with the ghastly eyeballs of his victims appeared before his eyes. The kobold shaman brought up his sharp dagger, intending to finish off Lee Hyun-wook, but he was able to react at the last moment. Lee Hyun-wook kicked the kobold shaman in the chest with incredible force, knocking him back and gaining himself precious moments. Park Jun-mo ran up to the wounded corporal, bloody and barely alive, and screamed desperately in desperation and fear. The kobold shaman quickly recovered from the blow and prepared to attack again, watching his defeated victim from on high. Lee Hyun-wook, enduring the pain, ordered Park Jun-mo to flee. But the latter, worried about him, begged the corporal to put on the mask sooner. Suddenly, the kobold shaman mortally wounded Park Jun-mo, who collapsed lifelessly on the ground, bleeding and losing consciousness. Lee Hyun-wook cried out in despair as he saw his comrade die and realized that history was repeating itself with horrifying accuracy. He bitterly remembered that in his previous life, Park Jun-mo had died like this while trying to heroically protect him from imminent death. Meanwhile, other soldiers finished installing sensors at the sewer manhole, reporting their success and requesting more devices. Lee Hyun-wook, realizing the gravity of the situation, thought that today's main fight would take place right there. Park Jun-mo readily responded to the sergeant's call, reporting loudly and clearly that he was listening and would follow his orders. Lee Hyun-wook ordered Park Jun-mo to signal him later, and when he did, to gather the squad and leave the operation area immediately. Park Jun-mo was completely dumbfounded by such an unexpected and strange order, not understanding what exactly his sergeant was up to. Terrified, he whispered that it was desertion, AWOL, punishable by a minimum of 5 years in prison. Lee Hyun-wook objected with icy calmness and a steely glint in his eyes that this was not desertion, but a deliberate tactic. Meanwhile, reports from other squads began coming over the radio, Delta, Epsilon, and Gamma reporting no survivors. Squad Beta reported finding a huge nest of kobolds in Zone 2, Quadrant B9, where they were very numerous. The estimated number of kobolds was over 200, and Beta's squad leader gave the command to prepare for a hard fight. The soldiers of Beta Squad were ordered to immediately fall into formation and use magic with as much range as possible. The fighters with heavy shields quickly lined up, having successfully completed the infiltration of Pie Point and preparing to defend against the monsters. Squad leader Beta loudly commanded them to form up, and the soldiers behind their shields prepared their magical weapons for battle. The offensive squad was ordered to immediately create magic circles and maintain their battle positions at all costs. The soldiers behind their shields activated magic circles that shone brightly, illuminating the huge cluster of approaching kobolds. Beta's squad leader gave the order to hold on while the first kobolds had already begun furiously attacking their defensive magical shields. With a loud cry of "Fire!" the commander ordered a barrage of fire, and torrents of flame rained down on the advancing kobolds. Magical circles spewed pillars of fire, sizzling whole crowds of kobolds and creating a wall of fire in their path. Lee Hyun-wook radioed orders to Beta's squad to close in on the remaining kobolds toward the gutters, rushing them to comply. Soldiers from different zones continued to install motion sensors, reporting successful installation in the second zone. Soon a report came in that all sensors had been successfully installed, and in Zone 5, the kobold detection operation was underway. The soldier was carefully taping 2 strips of aluminum tape crosswise on the asphalt, marking the location of the next motion sensor. Lee Min-hee approached Lee Hyun-wook, who was installing the sensor, and asked with undisguised curiosity what he was doing. Lee Hyun-wook hurriedly jumped up and saluted, reporting that, according to the manual, he was installing motion sensors in the dangerous area. He also added that he marked the relevant places with aluminum tape, to which Lieutenant Lee Min-hee mentally called him an asshole. 3 knights from the Blue Blossom Guild were already standing outside, ready for battle and with their appearance, inspiring confidence in success. Lieutenant Lee Min-hee irritably told Lee Hyun-wook that they were supported by the guild and he should stop messing around. Lee Hyun-wook calmly announced that the first platoon would begin the operation in 20 minutes, and their support squad should get the antidote. He added that the platoon's vice commander had ordered them to stop the monsters from being able to get out of the rear and into the living area. The soldiers looked at each other, puzzled as to why their sergeant Lee Hyun-wook was speaking so loudly, and turned their attention back to the lieutenant. Lieutenant Lee Min-hee, gritting his teeth in anger, incredulously questioned Lee Hyun-wook if he was seriously telling him this now. He scornfully reminded Lee Hyun-wook that the latter seemed to have forgotten that he had only gotten his position through the favor of the battalion commander. The lieutenant arrogantly jabbed his finger at Lee Hyun-wook, calling him the only boy in the barracks, which only elicited a "that's right" from the latter. He mockingly added that Lee Hyun-wook had only fought in a real battle once, to which he again nonchalantly replied, "That's right." Lieutenant Lee Min-hee irritatedly asked if Lee Hyun-wook was going to teach him and ordered him to make a simpler face and not get smart. Sergeant Choi Seong-ha, a S-rank spellcaster mage, suddenly appeared, curiously asking if something was wrong with the platoon leader. Lieutenant Lee Min-hee was confused, not knowing how to explain the situation to the vice commander, and mumbled something inarticulately in response. Lee Hyun-wook mentally chuckled. After all, he had provoked the lieutenant on purpose, knowing that Sergeant Choi Seong-ha was his weak point. Lieutenant Lee Min-hee, trying to justify himself to Choi Seong-ha, laughingly stated that the support squad was failing and he was helping them. He smiled embarrassedly at Sergeant Choi Seong-ha, awkwardly asking why she was here, clearly trying to hide his confusion. Sergeant Choi Seong-ha suddenly remembered and loudly announced that the battalion commander was urgently summoning Lee Hyun-wook to his office. Park Jun-mo asked perplexed, wondering if Lieutenant Seo Yun-ha was talking about him, not believing such honor and attention to his person. She stood on the rooftop, watching the military trucks move through the empty city streets, preparing for the important operation ahead. In the scope of a sniper rifle, Seo Yun-ha and one of her soldiers were discussing the details of the plan, standing among the ammunition crates on the roof. The soldier asked her to stop the second platoon leader from picking on her, but she replied that she still had important things to do right now. The pink-haired girl, one of her subordinates, winked coquettishly and announced that she would finish installing the sensors and he was free to go. Seo Yun-ha thought with annoyance that there wasn't much time left and didn't understand what the battalion commander suddenly needed urgently from her. A sniper from her squad asked uncertainly if she was sure the attack squad should be here during the raid on the kobolds now. She replied that that was what he had ordered and they, as soldiers, should just do what they were commanded without asking too many questions. Lee Hyun-wook arrived at the battalion commander's temporary command post and reported his arrival, saying that he had been summoned here. He was surprised to see Warrant Officer Choi Myung-ho, an old acquaintance of his there, and didn't understand what he was doing here at this moment. The battalion commander addressed him, "Sergeant," and Lee Hyun-wook stretched at attention, answering, "Yes, sir," as he waited for further orders. He mentally wondered why Choi Myung-ho was here with the commander, for it was very strange and unusual for him right now. The battalion commander stated that he wanted Lee Hyun-wook to pass the test, taking the place of the absent Choi Yoon-jun in this operation. He explained that Lee Hyun-wook would be acting as the first squad leader of the first platoon during the second attack on the gate. Lee Hyun-wook was shocked, because in his past life, the commander hadn't paid him a single bit of attention, and he didn't understand what was happening now. He figured he didn't have time for this and should immediately return to his squad who needed his help. Lee Hyun-wook turned to the battalion commander, reminding him that since the distribution, he had always performed missions only with the support squad. He countered that they weren't in training, and why risk the soldiers of the first platoon in such a dangerous and unpredictable situation? The battalion commander looked at him sternly and cut him off that this was an order that tolerated no objection or discussion on his part. At that moment, a soldier burst into the headquarters, reporting that the boss monster had left the kobold nest, and the personnel in the second and third red zones needed to remain vigilant. Lee Hyun-wook thought with horror that the kobolds would soon attack the support squad, and if he didn't get there in time, the squad in the rear would be destroyed. Gritting his teeth, he decided that he had to get out of here now at all costs to save his comrades from imminent doom now. He approached the battalion commander, saying he had something to tell him, trying to find a way to leave headquarters and get back to the squad. The battalion commander looked at him carefully and replied briefly, "Yes," waiting to see what the sergeant wanted to tell him. Lee Hyun-wook was silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts before putting forth his request or plan of action to the commander in this situation. Meanwhile, Seo Yun-ha was on the rooftop watching the night city through binoculars, looking for signs of kobold or other monster activity. The scope of her binoculars showed Lee Hyun-wook running down the street, and she was surprised to follow his swift movement now. Seo Yun-ha lowered her binoculars, clearly surprised by this soldier's behavior, and didn't understand what made him leave his post in such a hurry. Lee Hyun-wook shouted, "Support squad!" in desperation, realizing that there was less and less time left and he might not be able to reach them in time. With a shout of "Gas!" he rushed down the street, wringing all his strength to get to the scene of the supposed attack as quickly as possible. Suddenly, huge green shoots burst out of the ground, enveloping the support squad's trucks and blocking their escape route now. Lee Hyun-wook shouted, "No!" in horror as he saw the green poisonous mist envelop the entire street where his squad was at that moment. "Damn it," he thought with annoyance, realizing that things had happened faster than he had expected, and his comrades were trapped in a death trap. Gasping for breath from the noxious smoke, he blurted out, "Shit, piece of shit!" trying to cover his nose and mouth with his hands so he wouldn't inhale the poison now. He remembered the invention pouch that allowed him to load items from military supplies and decided to use one immediately. A cloud blade appeared from the bag and immediately began to absorb the surrounding moisture, preparing to create a protective damp mist here. The system window reported that the cloud blade was absorbing water and creating a wet mist, and 25% of the moisture had already been absorbed. Lee Hyun-wook noted that he can't see anything because of the poisonous smoke, and he needs to act quickly to neutralize this threat now. He wondered anxiously if he was too late, and if his comrades would be able to hold out until he did something about it. Staring into the poisonous fog, he mentally appealed to Junmo, begging him to gather everyone and flee, saving their lives from the monsters. The huge berserk kobold with a fierce roar pierced one of the support squad soldiers with its claw, leaving him no chance of escape. The wounded soldier in the gas mask screamed in pain and horror as the monster's claws dug into his side, drenching everything around him in his blood. Another soldier, Private Park Jun-mo, cried out in desperation for help while a rat-like kobold gnawed at his leg, causing unbearable pain. One of the soldiers saw this and took aim with his rifle, preparing to fire at the attacking monsters and save his comrade. He furiously shouted, "Damn rat, get away from him now!" and fired, trying to drive the creature away from the injured Park Jun-mo immediately. The bullets pierced several kobolds, which collapsed to the ground with a shriek, but their place was immediately taken by new, even more ferocious creatures. The support squad commander ordered everyone to climb into the war boxes and bring the injured An Min-dae with them to take cover from the attack. One of the soldiers shouted that he had rescued Private An Min-dae and dragged him to cover while the rest of them shot back at the attackers. The soldiers desperately shot back, trying to drag their wounded comrade to safety, but the kobolds continued to advance, bringing death and destruction. The platoon vice commander clutched her head in horror, unable to believe the nightmare that was happening, and her eyes widened with fear. One of the soldiers tried to bring her to her senses, yelling, "Platoon vice commander, come to your senses." But she was too scared to react. He thought bitterly that she was only 20 years old after all, and this was her first real assignment after being assigned such a terrible combat experience. He realized that there was nothing he could do for the soldiers of the support squad in the current situation, and they were doomed to die in this battle. One of the soldiers shouted to Private Park Jun-mo that they were running out of supplies and this was his last store, after which they would be left unarmed. Park Jun-mo closed his eyes in despair, wondering what to do, and whether they would all die here from the clutches of these horrible monsters. He mentally groaned. How would Sergeant Lee Hyun-wook act in such a situation if he were here, and would he be able to save them? Suddenly, he heard a shout that Private An Min-tae needed urgent medical attention, and someone was calling for the squad vice commander to come to the injured man. Park Jun-mo resolutely pulled out some item from his inventory bag, preparing to use it in this hopeless situation now. One of the soldiers screamed in horror that they were out of supplies and could no longer shoot back at the advancing kobolds now. Lee Hyun-wook finally reached the battle site and, seeing the desperate situation of his squad, prepared to engage the enemies. Park Jun-mo's eyes flashed resolutely, and he shouted loudly for the support squad to listen to him carefully and immediately follow orders. He explained that kobolds are obsessed with shiny things, and he would attack them to get them away from here, giving the others a chance to escape. Park Jun-mo ordered all the platoon members, the vice commander, and the wounded to leave immediately while he diverted the monster's attention. The vice commander looked at him in horror and asked what he was saying, not believing his selfless and very dangerous plan now. He firmly stated that it was the platoon vice commander's order, and recalled that Sergeant Lee Hyun-wook had said as if the Blue Flower Guild was outside the red zone. Park Jun-mo warned that when he gave the signal, they should grit their teeth and run with all their might, not looking back at all. He bitterly thought that his pathetic electric power was unable to kill even a single monster, but he would still have to use it. With a desperate cry of "Hya-ah-ah-ah-ah-ah," he rushed forward, raising the electrically glowing object high to draw the kobold's attention to himself. He shouted to his comrades that this was their chance and they needed to run. All of them run, while he distracted the enraged monsters now. The vice commander whispered his name with pain in her voice. "Jun-mo," as she watched him single-handedly throw himself at an entire horde of bloodthirsty creatures. He thought that if Sergeant Lee Hyun-wook was here, he would find the same use for his pitiful strength by using him as bait. If Lee Hyun-wook was here, he would definitely use him as bait without thinking about his safety for the sake of overall victory here. Park Jun-mo ran, dragging the pack of kobolds behind him, and Lee Hyun-wook appeared behind them, creating a vortex of blue energy blades. This deadly vortex rained down on the kobolds pursuing Park Jun-mo, tearing them to pieces and drenching everything around them with their dark blood. Lee Hyun-wook smirked as he kicked the fallen Park Jun-mo and said that he, the creep, had heard everything, clearly overhearing his thoughts about himself. He raised the cloud blade high, which began to emit clouds of moist mist, neutralizing the poisonous gas that enveloped the battlefield around him. The system window reported that the wet mist neutralized the poisonous gas, and 100% of the moisture was absorbed by the blade for this effect. Park Jun-mo looked at Sergeant Lee Hyun-wook with astonishment and relief, unable to believe that he had shown up and saved them at the last moment. Lee Hyun-wook calmly looked at his rescued comrade and said his name, Park Jun-mo, letting him know that it was over. Park Jun-mo tried to justify himself, saying that he was misunderstood and was just trying to imitate him to lead the monsters away from the squad. Lee Hyun-wook smiled warmly and thanked him for surviving, adding that he did a great job in this difficult situation. Lee Hyun-wook thought excitedly that now he would be able to enjoy a real feast, absorbing the essence of the defeated kobolds around him. He laughed madly and said that since Park Jun-mo had prepared so many dishes for him, he would eat every single one without leaving a crumb. Standing over the bodies of the slain kobolds, he swung the cloud blade, preparing to absorb their metallic essence and become even stronger now. With a satisfied smile, he pronounced that they looked damn tasty, referring to the defeated monsters, not anything else at this point. Suddenly he frowned, realizing that he couldn't eat because of Park Jun-mo's presence, and he let out a "damn it" while hiding his hunger. He turned to his comrade and asked where their boss was by the way, trying to change the subject and distract him from his strange thoughts. The horde of kobolds stared at them with burning eyes, clearly smelling the presence of a strong enemy and preparing for another fierce attack. Lee Hyun-wook grabbed Park Jun-mo's arm and yelled for him to run as their squad is in danger and they need to rush to help. He explained that because of the gas, the visibility was poor, and in such a case it was impossible to render assistance. It was necessary to act quickly and decisively. Seo Yoon-ha radioed orders to the offensive squad to stay in their position and shoot the kobolds leaving the area with the gas now. One of her snipers asked in surprise where she was going, seeing that she was preparing to leave her position on this rooftop. Seo Yoon-ha, putting on a gas mask, replied that Lee Hyun-wook definitely acts like he knows what's going to happen and she needs to check something out. She jumped off the roof, using her abilities to land smoothly below, shrouded in a green poisonous mist from the monsters. The vice commander of the support squad cried in despair and begged for rescue, realizing they were in a hopeless and deadly trap. One of the soldiers reported that Private An Min-dai had collapsed and was about to die and needed to be treated now or it would be too late. Another soldier screamed in horror that their shelter was being torn apart and the protective barrier was about to fall under the onslaught of fierce monsters. He added that the boss monster's spell was too strong, and they needed to hold on at all costs without letting it get inside their hideout. A huge kobold shaman with a flaming staff was channeling his dark magic into the protective barrier, trying to break through to the remaining soldiers. With a loud crack, the barrier failed, and one of the soldiers shouted in horror that he had broken through, and now they were definitely finished in this battle. A horde of kobolds poured into the breach, and another soldier warned that they were coming, and one must prepare for the final battle now. One of the soldiers asked in despair what they should do now, while another replied gloomily that it looked like they were definitely finished. There was no more hope. Suddenly, there was a loud shout of "Hey!" and Lee Hyun-wook and Park Jun-mo saw a horde of angry kobolds charging at them. One of the kobold mages angrily roared, "Damn rats!" and Lee Hyun-wook shouted in desperation for them not to touch his squad. The cloud blade glowing with blue flames soared into the air, and the kobold mage looked at it in surprise, not realizing what was happening. The energy whip released by Lee Hyun-wook coiled around several kobolds, throwing them aside and clearing a path for retreat. One of the kobold mages received a whiplash blow to his large jug, which immediately cracked, robbing him of some of his magical power. Lee Hyun-wook and Park Jun-mo rushed to escape, dodging the traps the kobolds were setting in an attempt to stop or slow them down. The kobold mage took out a handful of sharp darts from his pouch and threw them forcefully at the fleeing soldiers, aiming directly at their backs. Lee Hyun-wook and Park Jun-mo desperately dodged the darts flying at them as they whistled past, narrowly missing them. Park Jun-mo managed to fend off several darts with his machine gun, but one of them still stabbed into his shoulder, causing sharp pain. Lee Hyun-wook shouted, "Get down!" in horror, trying to warn his comrade of the danger, but it was too late. The system window reported that the metal weight available for control was 2,950 grams, and the conversion rate was too fast. Lee Hyun-wook, surrounded by many glowing blue blades, lost control of his M7 bayonet knife, which fell to the ground with a clang. Damned dark mage kobold, he reprimanded, realizing that the man wasn't commanding them, but controlling them himself using his dark magic. He realized that scaring off the kobolds wouldn't buy him any time, as the mage would still direct them at him again and again. Lee Hyun-wook took aim with his assault rifle, realizing that it was dangerous to fight when Junmo was around and he needed to act very carefully. He shouted to his comrade to go back to the fortification and that he would give a signal when it was safe to retreat from here. Park Jun-mo asked in a panic what the signal was, but Lee Hyun-wook only barked, "Just run," and they dashed away from their pursuers. They ran as hard as they could, leaping over the ruined fortifications, while the glowing cloud blade hovered above them, lighting their way. Lee Hyun-wook used his mind control ability to direct the remaining kobolds at each other, creating chaos in their ranks. He exhaled a sigh of relief and said that they were a little late, but they had done their job and his squad had been saved from death. Lee Hyun-wook was horrified to see his fellow cheerleaders surrounding the badly wounded soldier, trying to give him first aid. One of the soldiers, upon seeing him, whispered fearfully, "Sergeant," not believing that he was able to fight his way to them through a horde of enraged kobolds. Park Jun-mo reported that Private An Min-dae was unconscious and his condition was critical. He urgently needed qualified help. Lee Hyun-wook calmly replied what were they talking about, since they had a responsible person with them, hinting at the vice commander who was supposed to take control of everything. The vice commander clutched her head in horror, trembling with fear and unable to do anything about this critical and dangerous situation. Lee Hyun-wook angrily asked what she was doing since the private was dying, and she needed to help him immediately instead of panicking. He thought with annoyance that she had been consumed by a panic attack, and if their only healer was in that state, they were definitely finished now. His eyes flashed with rage, and he growled that if she didn't come to her senses, they would all be destroyed, leaving no chance of survival. He sternly called her by her name and rank. "Sergeant Choi Seon-ha," trying to get her out of her stupor and force her to act decisively. The girl flinched at his harsh shout and looked at him fearfully, still unable to deal with her panicked fear. Lee Hyun-wook asked if she really wanted everyone here to die and ordered her to come to her senses, because they were now fighting for life. He asked if she was then going to spend her life in regret, and if she knew how awful such a life of guilt was. The girl, hearing his words, came to her senses a little and whispered his name, Hyun-wook, beginning to realize the seriousness of her situation. Suddenly, a stream of golden energy erupted from her body, directed at the wounded soldier, and she began to use her healing abilities. She opened her spell book, and glowing runes swirled around her as she channeled healing magic on the injured An Min-dae. Lee Hyun-wook asked the vice commander how he was doing, and she said that he had lost a lot of blood because of her, but she wouldn't give up in this fight. Sergeant Choi Seong-ha said with determination in her eyes that she would not give up and would do everything possible to save her comrade's life. Lee Hyun-wook smiled warmly and thanked her for her courage and determination, realizing that they now had a chance of salvation. He said he would lend their knives, and several blades enveloped in blue energy soared into the air, ready for another deadly attack. Park Jun-mo looked at him in horror and whispered for the sergeant to just not say that he was going to do what he thought he was going to do. The boy with rage in his eyes decided that this was it. They needed to get revenge on these creatures for everything they had done to his comrades. A woman in a luxury car, talking on the phone, was surprised to hear about some wonderful event and briefly confirmed the understanding. She, elegantly adjusting her glasses, thought about the need to pay a visit for comfort while a huge spider sat on her shoulder. The car was rushing along the night highway, and she instructed the driver to drive to Itaewon, clearly pursuing some important goal of her own. Lee Hyun-wook, surrounded by kobolds, used his abilities, creating a vortex of blue energy blades to repel the enemy's attacks. He stepped on two crossed ribbons on the ground and realized with satisfaction that he had found some important clue or meaningful sign. With a sly smile, he thought that all the victims had gathered in the perfect place to hunt, and mentally wondered if they had lost their minds. He mentally noted that he had set up boxes and sensors around the center seat, creating a clever trap for his insidious enemies. Lee Hyun-wook was sure that the game would be over once he got to their leader, secretly managing all these events in the shadows. He activated his metal detection ability, and the entire street in front of him lit up blue, indicating the location of metal objects around him. He assumed that any metal he couldn't see must belong to a kobold, after all. Those carried metal weapons and sturdy armor usually. The system window displayed information about his metal control ability, consuming mana and increasing the weight available to control him. Lee Hyun-wook, being at the center of the swirl of blue energy blades, skillfully directed them at the evil kobolds attacking from all sides. A kobold mage with a fire head and a red magic circle in his hand unleashed his destructive magic on Lee Hyun-wook at this moment. Lee Hyun-wook, realizing where the enemy was, rushed towards the mage, dodging his attacks and preparing to strike back at the villain. The mage let out a furious roar of frustration as his fire attack missed its target without causing Lee Hyun-wook any harm in the fight. He used his dark magic to grab a few of Lee Hyun-wook's blue blades, trying to deprive him of his weapons and combat advantage. Lee Hyun-wook angrily demanded the little bastard to return the knives, not intending to give up so easily and lose his precious weapon. The system window alerted that his M7 bayonet knife was bound by a force beyond his available control, and he could not retrieve it immediately. He looked in amazement at the system windows that didn't respond to his commands, and didn't understand why it didn't work at the moment. The kobold mage with burning eyes threw a multitude of sharp darts at Lee Hyun-wook, trying to stop him and prevent him from getting closer. Lee Hyun-wook raised his cloud blade high and prepared to repel the hail of deadly darts flying at him from this strong enemy. He easily repelled all the darts with his blade, creating an impenetrable shield of blue energy and metal around him in this fight. The boy stood among the defeated kobolds, surrounded by puffs of poisonous fog, and prepared for a decisive battle with their insidious leader. The kobold mage once again used his dark magic, trying to seize control of Lee Hyun-wook's blades and deprive him of his main weapon here. Lee Hyun-wook let out a "damn it" as his body appeared to be pinned with many darts, but he still stood on his feet without giving up. He grinned evilly, saying that they almost made him think it was over, just like in his past, equally unreal life. The guy realized that if it wasn't for the body reinforcement, this would have happened and he would be dead by now, unable to resist this attack. He created several spinning discs of blue energy around him, ready to repel any attack and protect him from more blows. Lee Hyun-wook looked at the kobold mage with hatred and roared, "Foul!" His eyes filled with rage and lust for immediate revenge. He directed the energy discs at the horde of kobolds, and they scattered away, screaming, unable to withstand such power. With a fierce cry of "Die!" he rushed to the attack, swinging his blade and creating a deadly swirl of steel around him. This vortex spun the kobolds around, tossing them into the air and tearing them to pieces, leaving them no chance of escape. Lee Hyun-wook stood in the middle of the battlefield, shrouded in clouds of smoke and steam, his eyes burning with determination, and he was ready for the final battle. He spotted the dark kobold mage hiding in the shadows, and thought with anticipation that now it was time for their duel. Gritting his teeth, he declared that it was time to settle the score, and prepared for a decisive battle with this main and most dangerous enemy. Huge green shoots erupted from the ground again, rushing towards him, but he was ready for this attack and had no intention of retreating. Lee Hyun-wook grinningly told the mage that it was pointless to fight, and asked if he realized how much effort he had put in to make sure that only he was left. His eyes sparkled with determination, and he reactivated his metal detection ability to know the exact location of his enemy now. He thought that if he thoughtlessly threw his blades at him like last time, he would just catch them, and needed to attack very carefully. Lee Hyun-wook was puzzled as to why the kobold mage was completely still, as if he was waiting for something or plotting a new insidious attack. Suddenly, red energy tentacles erupted from the ground and rushed towards him, and he barely had time to jump away from them. The fire-headed kobold mage was squatting, controlling those tentacles coming from under his feet and creating a dangerous trap. One of the tentacles grabbed Lee Hyun-wook's leg, and he collapsed to the ground with a scream, unable to free himself from the tight grip. He was lifted into the air and hung upside down, completely defenseless in the face of his enemy, who was gloatingly watching him at that moment. The mage pointed his weapon at him, from which several more red tentacles erupted, ready to strike him deadly this time. The kobold mage's eye flashed with rage, and he viciously called him a petty rat, clearly enjoying his opponent's helplessness in the fight. Lee Hyun-wook, hanging upside down, challengingly wondered if the man was amused and prepared for another attack, not intending to give up so easily. He thought furiously about how many more times today this creep would cause him to have a PTSD flashback attack. It was just unbearable. With a shout, he twisted and kicked the mage in the chest, causing him to recoil and loosen the grip of his energy tentacles on him. He then gave him a powerful blow with the butt of his automatic rifle on his head, stunning him and forcing him to release his magic weapon immediately. Lee Hyun-wook deftly dodged the mage's counterattack, who tried to grab him with his clawed paws but missed this time. He exclaimed angrily that he dared to aim at his back, for it was the most painful and humiliating memory he had ever had. The guy growled if the mage knew how much he hated being attacked from behind and grabbed his arm, not giving him a chance to move. With a scream, he punched the mage in the face, then again, putting all his hatred and rage for the creature into each blow. His body was racked with steely energy, and he thought this creep needed a real beating to make sure he remembered it forever. With incredible force, he unleashed a hail of blows on the mage, tearing him to pieces and leaving him no chance of escape. He reported that he had no idea how many times since returning in time he had imagined the moment when he would finally get his revenge on them all. Lee Hyun-wook stated that the mage was the first to fall, and he should consider it an honor because his death was quick and almost painless. With a chuckle, he added that once the mage's mask was destroyed, he wouldn't be able to use his shitty magic, and offered to cure his PTSD. A multitude of blue energy blades pierced through the kobold mage's body, tearing him apart and leaving him no chance of survival. Lee Hyun-wook walked over to the defeated mage and grinned, wondering why he was squeaking since he wasn't dying yet and his torment was just beginning. He grabbed the mage by the scruff of the neck and asked if he knew how many years he had spent crippled by his fault, and now it was time for payback. The guy stated that the mage would only be pierced by blades while he avenged the members of his squad he had killed in his past life. He added, and the image of Park Jun-mo, who greeted him cheerfully, calling him Corporal Lee Hyun-wook, appeared in his memories. Lee Hyun-wook angrily said that it was his revenge for Park Jun-mo, who died trying to save him, and stabbed his cloud blade into the mage. The system window reported that the cloud blade was absorbing the blood of elite monsters and was filled with unknown energy at 1% of its maximum. He told the mage to hold off on dying yet, as there was one last step left, and prepared for the final act of his revenge on this one. Then he added, and his face contorted with rage as he remembered the scar the mage had left on his face in the past. The cloud blade thrust into the mage glowed with a bright light, and the system window reported that the hidden power of the blade would be unlocked completely. Lee Hyun-wook exhaled in relief, realizing that he had finally changed the first event that had tormented him so much in his past unreal life. The emptied streets of the city, shrouded in a green poisonous fog, bore witness to the brutal battle that had just ended forever here. A strange golden medallion fell out of the body of the defeated kobold mage and fell to the ground with a clang, attracting Lee Hyun-wook's attention. He looked at the medallion in surprise, not realizing where it had come from, and the system window informed him that he had obtained the Inferno Devil medallion. The boy was looking at the medallion, which depicted a ram with horns, and couldn't understand why it had appeared here. Someone's clawed paws reached for the medallion, and the inscription said that the Devil's Inferno medallion belonged to him, an as yet unknown being. An image of a huge elephant-like monster appeared in his memories. On its back stood a dark figure whose army of the dead was hell for humans. This figure was humanity's worst enemy, a ruthless and incredibly powerful being that brought death and destruction to all living things around it. A long-haired man with burning red eyes and a sinister grin sat on a throne made of bones, and the caption read, Necromancer. Lee Hyun-wook was horrified to think that he would now have to face an even more dangerous and powerful enemy than he had imagined. Lee Hyun-wook thought that of the things he and Necromancer had in common was only the pumping feature, and after returning in time, he hid his rank because of it. He remembered that in his previous life, he had barely managed to finish the fight in his workshop of blue lava golems and get a pitiful copy of Inferno. The boy wondered with bewilderment why the real Inferno was here, since it completely changed the course of the events he had known before. Gritting his teeth, he wondered if there was something he didn't know, and his knowledge of the past was incomplete or even wrong this time. He noticed that the poisonous gas was dissipating and realized that he had less and less time left to do what he had planned earlier. Lee Hyun-wook decided that he should eat the medallion as soon as possible, but Park Jun-mo called out to him, interrupting his desperate thoughts at that moment. He turned around in horror and saw Seo Yoon-ha standing behind him, and realized that she could see how he was about to eat the artifact. The girl gave him a stern look and coldly asked him who the hell he was, demanding an immediate and honest answer from him. Lee Hyun-wook mentally groaned that he had screwed up, and anxiously thought about how much she had seen and what would happen to his plans now. Suddenly another woman, elegantly dressed, appeared on the street, who was watching with interest what was happening around them right now. She reported that she watched from afar, and the fight was impressive, clearly appreciating the abilities of Lee Hyun-wook and his comrades in this fight. She then turned to Seo Yoon-ha with a chuckle, noting that the latter was the third daughter of the Paladin commander, and how much she had grown since their last meeting. Seo Yoon-ha introduced herself as the commander of the offensive unit of the 1st Battalion of the 3rd Brigade of the AFBM, and said that civilians were strictly forbidden to enter this place. The pink-haired woman standing next to Lee Hyun-wook curiously asked if that meant he was a sergeant without believing it. The other woman, Yoo Ha-yoona, the head of the Kula strike squad of the Blue Flower Guild, an A-rank player, greeted Sergeant Lee Hyun-wook with a smile. She asked in surprise, "Don't tell me he doesn't know who she is," clearly expecting her name to be known all around. Lee Hyun-wook thought gloomily. He would never forget her. Because of all the villains who had destroyed humanity, he would never forget her. In his memories, Seo Yoon-ha with the fire shield shouted at him to pull himself together and survive at all costs, protecting him from the deadly attack. He then asked what she was doing and ordered her to leave, but she replied, "No," stating that she was his shield and his life was in her hands. Against the blood-red moon, he saw her silhouette standing on a pile of corpses and realized with horror that she was one of those who had betrayed him. Yoo Ha-yoona wondered with a chuckle if he didn't realize what an incredible opportunity had opened up in front of him at this very moment. Seo Yoon-ha sternly stated that this was a place where fighting was taking place and asked Mrs. Yoo Haeon to immediately remove herself from here now. Yoo Ha-yoona was indignant, "What the hell?" and asked if a soldier shouldn't address others by their rank, demanding respect for themselves. There was tension around them, and Lee Hyun-wook thought that he was somehow uncomfortable being around these two powerful women. Suddenly, the battalion commander appeared in the street, and all three of them looked at him in surprise, not expecting him to appear in this place. One of the soldiers jumped out of the truck and greeted Lieutenant Seo Yoon-ha, reporting that reinforcements had arrived for them now. The battalion commander ordered Seo Yoon-ha to report the situation, but immediately stopped her after noticing the presence of Yoo Ha-yoona and Lee Hyun-wook. Lee Hyun-wook mentally mumbled, as he remembered how he had almost been killed in his previous life, and thought that there was no way he could get out of here. He imagined his inner voice saying, "Goodbye, asshole, deal with this shit yourself," and he mentally cursed in frustration. The battalion commander turned to Yoo Ha-young, head of the Seoul Blue Flower Strike Force, noting that he was glad to meet them and they hadn't seen each other in a long time. He expressed incredible gratitude for the reinforcements from her guild, but reminded her that this was a battleground, not a stroll. The commander added that unauthorized entry without prior approval was unacceptable even for members of the Blue Flower Guild, and asked her to leave. Yoo Ha-yoona annoyingly thought, "Geez, seriously?" calling him a typical soldier who couldn't understand anything, and stated that she had an important business to attend to. She placed a lip print sticker on his form, playfully noting that it was her business card and he should keep it as a memento. With a sly smile, she whispered in Sergeant Lee Hyun-wook's ear for him to call her, clearly interested in his abilities and himself. The battalion commander called out, "Sergeant," to Lee Hyun-wook, and the latter replied, "That's right," with a shudder, listening carefully to his further orders now. The commander stated that from now on, Lee Hyun-wook would command the Kobold Sweep operation, and saving the civilians was a priority. Lee Hyun-wook was puzzled. What was the battalion commander thinking, giving him such responsible and dangerous assignments all of a sudden? The commander added that when everything was settled, Lee Hyun-wook would have to report the outcome to him personally without involving others. Lee Hyun-wook stretched at attention and replied, "That's right, ready to carry out the order despite all his doubts and fears." Lee Hyun-wook was relieved to think that, well, he had managed to survive this dangerous moment, and now he could take a little breather. He found himself in front of the 3rd Brigade of the VSSBM, the 1st Battalion, where he was to go through new trials and dangers now. The system window reported that the metal assimilation from the Inferno Devil Medallion was complete, and its weight available for control had increased. Suddenly he felt unbearable pain, and the system warned him that a breathing place was forming in his stomach, and it might hurt. Clutching his stomach, he moaned that he'd been through this once before and his body was still too weak, which was why it hurt so much. He walked out of the restroom and was called out by someone calling him Sergeant Lee Hyun-wook, which made him wary and turn around at the call. Park Jun-mo curiously peeked into the stall and asked if he was watching something interesting by himself there, clearly suspecting something amiss right now. Lee Hyun-wook, squirming in pain, replied that it wasn't what he thought it was, trying to hide his true condition from his annoying coworker. His body glowed red, and he barely held back a scream as Park Jun-mo asked him to show him later what he was hiding there. Lee Hyun-wook shouted in rage that he was thinking about the wrong thing and pushed him out of the restroom, not wanting anyone to see his weakness. He remembered that the gate with the kobolds, which everyone had underestimated, had caused a large number of incidents and brought much grief and destruction back then. Fortunately, Sergeant Choi Seung-ha brought Private An Min-dae out of critical condition and he was taken to a military hospital for treatment. After this incident, he gave up the idea of trying to protect everyone alone and began training the support squad members very diligently. This led to two problems, and the first was Sergeant Choi Seung-ha, who waved happily at him, calling out to him, "Hyun Wook." She started bothering him a lot after that day, always showing up around him and addressing him by name, which annoyed him a little. He tiredly asked the vice commander that again, not understanding what she wanted from him, or why she was so insistent on pursuing him. He figured there were too many variables in the military for things to go according to plan, and his life was starting to spiral out of control again. The second problem was that the battalion commander, Kim Kang-seok, suggested that he become an officer, which was completely unexpected for him. Lee Hyun-wook thought he wasn't even surprised by this anymore, and remembered how in his past life he couldn't wait to get fired. The battalion commander said the operation in Itaewon convinced him on his account, and he has a dream to create the perfect military culture. Lee Hyun-wook was puzzled as to why the hell the commander wanted him to help with his fantasies and decided to think about it on vacation. 3 weeks later, the long-awaited vacation time finally arrived, and the sky was clear and cloudless, promising a well-deserved rest for the soldier. On the first day of his vacation, he found himself outside Seoul Station, a large and modern train station, ready to enjoy his freedom from army life. Suddenly, he heard a noise in the restroom and saw someone fighting in there, which immediately caught his attention and made him wary. The system window congratulated him for fulfilling the special conditions and gaining the new ability, Breathing Place, Fire, of level 0 at once. He was relieved that he could finally stop doing things that caused gossip, like he was doing something weird in the restroom. Looking at his reflection in the mirror, he realized that in his current state, there was a chance that he wouldn't be able to handle the next gate. A press conference emerged in his recollection, where reporters asked how this was understood and whether they would leave Seoul Station unprotected. The military man replied that the army and authorities would explain their position, but reporters were indignant. Would they really abandon the townspeople at the station? A crowd of people screamed in panic, begging to be saved, to be allowed out, and calling for help, trapped in a station overrun by monsters. Lee Hyun-wook, looking in the mirror, bitterly thought that he really could have died if not for his knowledge of the future and incredible luck. He decided that he needed to make full preparations during his vacation because it was time to truly affect the future and change his destiny. The girl with pink hair, Choi Seon-ha, while lighting a cigarette, complained that it's been a long time since she's had a vacation and the army sucks. She looked down at her lighter in annoyance and asked, "Well, what's wrong with it again?" Clearly having trouble using it at this point. Seeing Lee Hyun-wook, she said his name in surprise, not expecting to meet him here at the train station on the first day of his vacation. She flirtatiously asked if he had a light, and he was surprised to recognize her as the vice commander of his squad, Choi Seong-ha. She greeted him cheerfully, noting that this was his first vacation in a while after all, and his parents must be overjoyed. Lee Hyun-wook calmly replied that they were both dead, having died when he was still young, much to the girl's surprise and a little upset. He added that he was fine, and although it was difficult and lonely at the time, as he got older, he found people who became his new family. Choi Seon-ha interjected in astonishment, "Like family?" Not believing her ears and looking at him with genuine curiosity and interest. In his vision, a crowd of people enthusiastically greeted him as the commander, the great steel emperor Lee Hyun-wook, awaiting his return. He pondered who those people from the past were to him, friends, co-workers, or still comrades in dangerous weapons back then. With a slight smile, he concluded that the definition of comrades in arms best described their then uneasy relationship. Once in the Yeongdeungpo area, he realized that he had only 4 days and 3 nights to fully prepare for the coming ordeal. With a sly grin, he decided that the first priority among the preparations would be to get the money to carry out his daring plans now. He stopped in front of a billboard for the Blue Tree Company, where the players flaunted the slogan of support from that very company. Lee Hyun-wook was aware that the owner of Blue Tree, Gordon Pressey, was already a multi-trillionaire whose dark money had a huge influence in the world. This money was used to purchase highly ranked strong individuals and players, valuable items, and he gradually sneaked into the management of everything unnoticed. He realized that their defeat at the hands of the villain had many reasons, but the main one was the money that gave that one limitless power and strength back then. Even with the inability to match Gordon financially, he needed to have enough money to avoid being sucked into his money game. Knowing the key future events, locations, and times of money accumulation gave him a tremendous advantage over all the other players in the world. He reasoned that if he invested the fastest, even small amounts would accumulate like a snowball, bringing him great wealth. As he approached the door of the Hope Guild, he realized that he needed someone who would never betray him for anything. A loyal and very trustworthy friend. He needed to trust someone who would not leave him, even with a simple verbal promise, and he knew the right candidate for the role. As he descended the stairs, he heard a furious shout of someone wondering what the hell was going on and if his interlocutor was a jerk. The second voice pleaded not to force him to fight, for heaven's sake, clearly anxious to avoid physical or otherwise unpleasant conflict right now. The young man tried to calm the enraged man, reminding him that he himself was aware of the low number of customers this past month. The gray-haired man lamented that he had tried very hard to find a job but had received only rejections, and it was humiliating for him to be offered the services of a bodyguard even. At that very moment, Lee Hyun-wook appeared in the doorway, and the man looked at him with obvious surprise, not expecting to see an outsider here. The gray-haired man exclaimed happily as he recognized the Tin Man's pilot and noted that they hadn't seen each other in a while, genuinely pleased at his unexpected appearance. During his high school years, Lee Hyun-wook would smile in a friendly manner, shaking hands and calling someone a buddy, happy to meet them. However, the matured Hyun-wook, now with a stern look, coldly pointed out that their relationship is not good enough for joy. In Lee's office, Won-chul and another man met Hyun-wook. To Won-chul's words, "Long time no see," the latter responded with a low-key hello. The third man, clearly frightened, asked Hyun-wook in a whisper why he even showed up here, creating tension. Lee Won-chul immediately rudely cut him off, wryly wondering if he had eaten his brain for lunch, showing his temper. Hyun-wook noticed with a slight chuckle that he said hello normally, and asked if Won-chul had forgotten their shared former memories. Won-chul, turning black with anger, threateningly suggested to Hyun-wook that he refresh his memory of the past immediately. The memory took them to the school rooftop, where young Hyun-wook was bragging about awakening his weak power in front of his laughing peers. The then Won-chul called Hyun-wook a mere loser with undisguised disgust, having absolutely no faith in his abilities. Immediately after saying that, young Won-chul brutally beat up Hyun-wook in front of everyone, showing his superiority. He disparagingly called Hyun-wook's strength worthless, threatening to finish him off for bragging and calling it humiliation. Back in the present, Won-chul, a C-rank fighter of the Hope Guild, challengingly asked if Hyun-wook was making a strong man out of himself. Won-chul then aggressively offered to beat up Hyun-wook like in the good old days, in front of a collection of sharp swords. Won-chul rushed forward, shouting that Hyun-wook would beg for mercy, but a third man tried to stop him. The man violently pushed the man away, threatening to kill him along with Hyun-wook if he didn't get out of the way immediately. Hyun-wook, without flinching a single muscle, calmly offered Won-chul a taste, which surprised his attacker greatly. His eyes flashed with an ominous blue light, and he suggested with icy calmness that Won-chul try to kill him if he could. Won-chul roared in uncontrollable rage, calling Hyun-wook the last words, completely losing control of himself. However, Hyun-wook stopped his powerful and furious punch with incredible ease with one hand, raising a whirlwind around him. In the next instant, Hyun-wook swiftly counterattacked, surrounding the completely stunned Won-chul with a multitude of shining energy blades. Surrounded by a dozen energy blades, Hyun-wook coldly informed Won-chul that although he wasn't sure if he could handle it, he would definitely beat him to a pulp like an entire army unit. Hyun-wook then added with a decisive clenched fist that, in other words, he was capable of ending Won-chul's life as a close combat player, showing his confidence. In the next second, a shining energy pen like a bullet darted straight towards the face of the stunned Won-chul, who froze in surprise and horror. Suddenly, another man who called Hyun-wook a buddy entered the room and rushed him, exclaiming that it was time for them to leave or else they would be late for the event. The man in the purple sweatshirt, previously startled by Won-chul, was now looking puzzled at what was going on, asking what was even going on here. Hyun-wook, abruptly changing his tone to a jokingly apologetic one, turned to Won-chul loudly, saying he was sorry and promised to be more careful next time. Then, to Won-chul's utter amazement, Hyun-wook suddenly hugged him tightly, to which he wailed furiously about what the hell he was doing, not understanding such behavior. Hugging Won-chul, Hyun-wook whispered quietly in his ear that he had heard rumors that he had been kicked out of the White Tiger Guild for his cowardice in the first raid. Memory obligingly brought up a shot of Won-chul running away from a huge snarling monster in a panic during a raid, ignoring his comrades' cries to stay in position. Won-chul, still clenched in Hyun-wook's embrace, hissed with undisguised shock and anger as he tried to figure out how Hyun-wook knew this shameful secret. Hyun-wook explained with a slight chuckle that he was, good at gathering information, and then snidely asked if Won-chul was going to fight an F-ranked player in front of people he knew. Looking Won-chul straight in his furious eyes, Hyun-wook assured him that he would preserve the dignity he held so dear, but ordered him not to get in his way again. Later, when the tension subsided, the very man in the business suit questioningly asked Hyun-wook, who was sitting on the couch, if he was telling the truth about the imminent rise of the stock. Hyun-wook only smiled mysteriously and confidently as he looked at the 3 cards with obscure symbols lying on the table in front of him, answering nothing to the direct question. The man stared in incredulous amazement at the tablet screen where the stock chart was skyrocketing upward and excitedly blurted out that this would change their whole life. At the same time, several security guards in strict suits outside the Blue Tree Corporation's fashionable building were tiredly complaining to each other about how much longer they had to stand guard without doing anything. One of them was slapped by his boss, a blond man with a neat beard, and wondered what had gotten into him, not expecting such a reaction. The head of security swore irritably, calling his subordinates bloody servants, and threateningly asked why they were making noise in a place reserved for important people. They were approached by an even more imposing and stern-looking man who looked down at the blond boss and asked if he was in charge, clearly doubting his authority. This new boss unceremoniously grabbed the blond man, angrily reprimanding him for not knowing the elementary alphabet and confusing the A, B, C, D areas. The ferocious boss threw the blond man high into the air with a mighty blow from below, showing his inhuman strength and fury. He then dropped the hapless blond man onto the pavement with such force that he punched through the ground, leaving a bloody crater and debris. The rest of the guards froze in place in horror, unable to believe the cruelty and power of their new superiors, gripped by fear. Towering over the defeated blonde, the boss breathed heavily and ordered his dazed subordinates to find him someone immediately. His face contorted with a grimace of pure hatred, his eyes filled with blood, and he growled an order to find Lee Hyun-wook, that scum, to finish him off. Meanwhile, Park Cheol-soo, the head of the Hope Guild, stared disbelievingly at the soaring stocks, shouting that this would change their entire lives. However, despite the euphoria, Park Cheol-soo admitted to Hyun-wook while standing outside the Hope Guild building that he still had a hard time believing it. His reaction was understandable, because it was hard to trust a man who promised to change lives by making money literally out of nowhere. Park Cheol-soo even speculated, looking at the 3 business cards of different organizations, whether they shared information with Hyun-wook for the sake of espionage. Hyun-wook calmly asked if Park Cheol-soo could trust him, considering all that he knew about himself and his past. Park Cheol-soo, a little stammered at the directness of the question, hastily and a little fearfully assured that of course he believed him. Hyun-wook mentally noted that he had told the whole truth except for the source of the information from his past life, and offered to look because he wasn't lying. To be convincing, Hyun-wook showed correspondence with the battalion commander, where the latter confirmed his willingness to help with the officer rank. Seeing this irrefutable proof on his phone screen, Park Cheol-soo shockingly exclaimed that it was indeed true. Then Hyun-wook held out his bank book to him, saying he wanted to entrust him with his investment, 20 million won left over from his parents. Hyun-wook asked if Park Cheol-soo sincerely believed him, to which the latter, shaking his hand, could only exhale, "Thank you," gratefully. Later, sitting on the steps, Park Cheol-soo philosophically remarked to Hyun-wook that everyone in this world has a different talent called a superpower. He patted Hyun-wook's shoulder encouragingly, advising him not to bark at himself and just keep living until their talents were also recognized as superpowers. Hyun-wook warmly thought that this investment was his way of repaying Park Cheol-soo for the kindness he received in his past life when he was a nobody. An image of the future flashed through his mind, where humanity would face alien beings and technology would be the key in a gate war. Wise mages in ancient robes conjured a glowing potion, for their abilities would be vital in the future to protect the world. In a high-tech lab, they studied the blueprint for a shining sword, realizing the dire need for an expert to communicate with the mysterious aliens. The rugged dwarven artisans were waiting with arms crossed, ready to hand over their unique technology to whoever would earn their trust and help. Lee Hyun-wook arrived at the busy alley of the Yongdinpo blacksmiths, where he asked the merchant about the price of manacam, receiving a sly counter-question in response. He pondered the second item in his plan to prepare for the future, determined to create his first master-level item with the help of the 7 dwarves. Lee Hyun-wook decided to discreetly recruit talented blacksmiths whose status was to eventually rise from a simple artisan to a true master of his craft. He entered the old forge, greeting the master, and knew he had to act quickly before the insidious villains suspected anything. Craftsman Kang Jong-do, known for his eccentricity and expelled from the guild, bluntly stated that he only sells finished goods off the shelves. Lee Hyun-wook didn't understand the master at first, but then he guessed with a sly smile that the spear in front of him was not a simple spear, but a very special spear. The master was concentrating on this unique spear, which was skillfully forged from the precious and incredibly rare orichalcone. Although the spear looked ungraceful, It had the power to kill a dragon and would inevitably pierce the heart of the mighty dragon Terax in the future. It was clear to Hyun-wook why the billet for the master artifact was in this dilapidated workshop when the red-haired girl who walked in called him a prick. The girl boldly parried Hyun-wook, defiantly asking why she wasn't allowed to say that if he himself spoke of others in such a manner. Lee Hyun-wook smiled warmly upon recognizing her and mentally greeted his longtime comrade-in-arms whom he hadn't seen in years. It was the talented blacksmith Kang Baek-seol, who was destined to inherit all of Kang Jong-do's abilities after 4 years and surpass her mentor. Kang Baek-seol instantly appreciated Hyun-wook's fabulously expensive clothes, a coat for 1.5 million won, and Saint Laurent boots for 1,600,000. Upon seeing his wealth, Kang Baek-seol immediately changed her face, ingratiatingly exclaimed that he was an honored customer, and asked about his desires. Hyun-wook noted her blind obsession with money, very much like dwarven greed, realizing that she was now paying attention to him. The girl got indescribably excited when she saw 18 million won and proclaimed Hyun-wook as the boss, and he wondered if he would earn her trust. The old blacksmith, Kang Jong-do, was suspiciously pondering why non-mage Hyun-wook needed rare alloys, and whether his huge sum of money turned out to be fake. Kang Baek-seol tried to reassure her father by assuring him that Lee Hyun-wook would surely find a use for the items he bought, and he confirmed that it was exactly what he needed, promising to stop by more often. Old Master Kang Jong-do hummed approvingly, and a radiant Kang Baek-seol kindly asked Hyun-wook to come again, to which he responded with a mutual goodbye. Hyun-wook mentally apologized to Kang Baek-seol, realizing that unlike the other comrades, he would have to call her out to fight again, seeing her defeated. As he left, Hyun-wook was determined that this time he would protect Kang Baek-seol at all costs as she waved goodbye from her workshop. One of Hyun-wook's companions, a guy in a purple hoodie, turned up at night outside an unremarkable gag motel, clearly expecting something important. Near the end of his vacation, Lee Hyun-wook meditated on a bed in a dark room, seeking to greatly increase his resistance to poisons and control over metal. The system window informed him that the poison enchanted metal had been assimilated with just under 20 minutes to go, and that there was a slight increase in resistance to the poison. Hyun-wook thought that normally such a process would have taken a lot of time, but now, thanks to the breathing place, it should have been much faster. The internal furnace in his body activated, and the legendary artifact, the Inferno Devil Medallion, swirled in a vortex of fire, intensifying the absorption process. The new information on his breathing place, fire ability, stated that his internal furnace was activated, speeding up his metal assimilation by 250%, but warned of a sharp pain. Hyun-wook's face contorted in agony, and the system's repeated warnings of the unbearable pain he was about to endure flashed before his eyes. Clutching his stomach, Hyun-wook furiously growled for the system to shut up, as he himself was well aware of the agony ahead, squirming on the bed. He gritted his teeth, realizing that there was little time left before the gate opened at Seoul Station, and he had to absorb everything, ordering himself to endure. 2 days later, the same guy in the purple hoodie pointed Lee Won-chul to a motel, informing him that Hyun-wook is there and hasn't come out for 2 days. The system notified Hyun-wook that he had been poisoned by various poisons, but had built up a level 2 poison resistance and improved his metal detection to 500 grams. Lee Hyun-wook stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by swirls of blue and orange energy, feeling a new wave of strength after a grueling workout. He was a little disappointed that the metal resistance had only reached level 2, but was glad that he could now control enough weight for 60 blades. Suddenly, the system congratulated him for successfully completing his first stealth breakthrough and gaining a new D-rank ability called Metal Strike. Hyun-wook grinned contentedly as he realized that this powerful metal-destroying ability would allow him to disable any equipment in one fell swoop. In the dim light of the room, blue electric discharges danced around his head, heralding new possibilities in Lee Hyun-wook's future accomplishments. The door to Lee Hyun-wook's room rattled with a mighty bang, but he remained unfazed by the sudden intrusion of an enraged Lee Won-chul. Lee Won-chul rushed in with a blazing scarlet fist, was surprised to note that Hyun-wook didn't even flinch, and wryly asked if he was hiding here. Hyun-wook calmly reminded him that he was a soldier bound by many inhibitions and politely asked if Won-chul could just walk out of here. Won-chul grinned viciously, contemptuously calling Hyun-wook's words utter nonsense, not intending to retreat a single step and clearly preparing to attack. He immediately rushed to attack with incredible speed, accusing Hyun-wook of cowardice and making up nonsense just to avoid the upcoming fight. With a fierce cry of "Just die!" Won Chul unleashed a crushing blow at Hyun Wook with his huge, energy-burning tiger fist. Hyun Wook stopped his powerful one-handed attack with astonishing ease, to which Won Chul exclaimed in surprise at what the hell had happened to his body. Restraining Won Chul's fist, Hyun Wook suggested that he continue their confrontation outside so that no civilians would interfere in their fight. In the corridor of the motel, the guests were already showing up, alarmed by the noise, wondering what the hell was going on and if another gate had opened. Won Chul broke free from his grip and angrily called Hyun Wook a pathetic tin man, clearly not going to stop the fight he started over some bystanders. He attacked Hyun Wook again, shouting out with disdain whether the latter was going to bluff his way to the end, not believing in his suddenly increased strength. Hyun Wook swiftly dodged his opponent's powerful leg kick, calmly admitting that 2 days ago it really would have been a bluff on his part. With eyes blazing with blue energy determination, Lee Hyun Wook furiously shouted that things were completely different now, making it clear that he had become much stronger. He gave Won Chul a lightning-fast and crushing forearm strike that sent him flying backwards, not expecting such power and speed from Hyun Wook. Won Chul's face contorted with unbearable pain and deepest shock, and Hyun Wook calmly asked if he could ask Lee Won Chul just one question. Towering over the defeated and writhing in pain Won Chul, Hyun Wook coldly remarked that it was nothing compared to what he had done to him, and asked why he had gone so far. Won Chul hissed with a wry and evil grin that Hyun Wook had gotten cocky after only one successful punch, not recognizing his defeat. He shouted in indescribable rage for Hyun Wook not to look at him like that, calling him a damn jerk and desperately trying to get up for another attack. Lee Hyun Wook angrily asked if Won Chul was completely unaware that innocent civilians could be seriously hurt if they continued their battle here. Won Chul, with complete indifference to other people's lives and seething rage, yelled back what the hell it even mattered to him. Lee Hyun Wook, engulfed in a red aura of anger, realized with horror that Lee Won Chul had finally and irrevocably gone mad. He realized that Won Chul only wanted him, and the only chance to minimize the damage to the building was to take their fight outside immediately. Wrapped in a red flame of determination, Lee Hyun Wook swiftly jumped out of the hotel room window right into the street, dragging his enemy behind him. Lee Won Chul roared angrily after him, demanding an answer as to where he was going so suddenly without finishing the fight he had started. Without hesitation, Won Chul rushed down with devastating force, unleashing a powerful leg kick surrounded by a scarlet energy glow. His landing on the pavement caused a colossal explosion, raising clouds of dust and debris, leaving a deep crater in the road in front of the motel. Lee Won Chul, surrounded by destruction, shouted furiously that he would finish off Lee Hyun Wook at any cost, leaving him no chance. Falling downward, Lee Hyun Wook instantly activated his steel body defense ability, preparing for a hard landing on the asphalt. Then, right before colliding with the ground, he applied metal control, concentrating energy in his feet to soften the impact and prepare. Lee Hyun Wook used a skillful chain of abilities to gracefully turn around in the air and meet Won Chul's attack with incredible agility. Lee Won Chul was absolutely stunned, unable to believe his eyes. How Hyun Wook was able to change the trajectory of his fall so abruptly and unexpectedly. Surrounded by a blue glow, Hyun Wook landed softly and confidently on his feet in the middle of the street, ready to continue the deadly fight. He thought that although he couldn't fly freely like in his previous life, the bundle of abilities allowed him some control over his body. Won Chul grinned contemptuously, saying that Hyun Wook's army seemed to have given him cheap buffs, but his pathetic tricks wouldn't work. Hyun Wook responded by creating a powerful vortex around Won Chul, using his enhanced abilities to control the environment and attack. Frightened passersby on the street asked each other in horror what the hell was going on here, and if it was the players fighting by any chance. Lee Won Chul growled with undisguised irritation. Was Lee Hyun Wook going to continue to just dodge his deadly attacks? He shouted furiously to Hyun Wook to stop running away and finally started advancing, urging him to fight openly and decisively. Won Chul unleashed a barrage of incredibly fast and powerful leg kicks on Lee Hyun Wook, which he barely had time to dodge. Cars honked in panic, and someone in the back of the motel shouted desperately for people not to go down to the first floor under any circumstances. Panic rose in the motel hallway, people shouting that the players there had put up a real fight, and someone said they had already reported them, suggesting that everyone sit this one out. Lee Hyun Wook realized that there were many civilians watching them, and as a sergeant, he couldn't respond to Won Chul's blows with full force so as not to hurt the innocents. Lee Won Chul mockingly wondered if it was the audience, and bloodily suggested that Hyun Wook get rid of this annoying nuisance immediately. With incredible speed, he rushed towards the motel building, his fist blazing with destructive red energy, clearly intending to attack the innocent people inside. Hyun-wook cried out in horror. Is Won-chul really planning to destroy an entire building, completely unaware that innocent people are there? Lee Hyun-wook shouted in desperation that these people had nothing to do with him, trying to reason with the distraught and completely out of control Won-chul. Won-chul angrily interjects that he doesn't care about these lowlifes, stating that he's pissed off at both Hyun-wook and these damn people who are in his way. He soared into the air, surrounded by a whirlwind of destructive energy, and roared with hatred that all they did was constantly tangle under his feet. Lee Hyun-wook's eyes flashed with icy blue rage, and he angrily muttered that Won-chul shouldn't have done that, deciding to end his life as a player. As Won-chul unleashed his punch, Hyun-wook met his attack, and his opponent's leg shattered into pieces from the collision with his improved defense. D-Rank's new Metal Strike ability allowed him to spend mana to break a certain amount of metal, with the cost depending on the amount of metal. A powerful blue energy discharge burst out from Hyun-wook's hand, completely destroying the metal part of Won-chul's prosthetic leg, leaving him in complete shock. Lee Hyun-wook's face, splattered with his opponent's blood, remained stern and unperturbed. He was prepared for any consequences of his decisive act. Lee Won-chul screamed in unbearable pain, unable to believe his eyes and screaming that his leg, his precious and powerful prosthesis, had been completely destroyed. He crawled away from Hyun-wook in horror, demanding that he stay away from him, and asked in rage what the hell that scumbag had done to him. Lee Hyun-wook, looking at his defeated enemy, coldly asked one last time why Won-chul would go so far in his senseless rage and cruelty. Won-chul hissed with hatred at what Hyun-wook was even talking about, stating that if he was pissed off by an annoying fly, he would just finish it off, of course. Hyun-wook disdainfully replied that he now understood the reason why a rat like Won-chul was kicked out of the wolf pack, because scoundrels with delusions of grandeur don't deserve to be players. Won-chul wailed in impotent rage at what this miserable piece of shit was capable of, and ordered Hyun-wook to stop making a fuss about trying to get up. Lee Hyun-wook, surrounded by the radiance of power, sternly warned Lee Won-chul to never get in his face again, or else he wouldn't get off with one leg. Through clenched teeth, Lee Hyun-wook muttered for Won-chul to thank the gods that he, Hyun-wook, was a member of the military and restrained himself. He couldn't miss his chance to save his comrades and take revenge on the villains, so he decided to get rid of the likes of Won-chul once and for all. Already outside the gag motel, many police cars with their blinkers on had gathered, attracted by reports of a devastating brawl between two players. While at the police station of the Special Awakened Commission, Hyun-wook calmly explained that he was just trying to stop a rampaging Lee Won-chul. The investigator noted that Hyun-wook's testimony was consistent with the witnesses, and added that this Lee Won-chul is a very troubled and angry type, and Hyun-wook was lucky. He was also surprised to note that this was the first time in his service that he had met a low-ranking player who had come out of such a serious battle without much injury. Lee Hyun-wook smiled embarrassedly and replied that what saved him was that his special armor had activated quite suddenly and very timely during the fight. The investigator, after listening to him, announced that Hyun-wook could be free to go, to which he politely thanked him for his understanding and cooperation. Walking out of the station, Hyun-wook thought that he had spent his whole life thinking that his F rank was a shameful stigma, and today it had helped him easily avoid unnecessary suspicion. Meanwhile, the other investigator excitedly called out to his colleague, arguing that he should definitely look at the new data, since Won-chul didn't have a mana problem. The first investigator, studying the report, perplexedly muttered that if this was to be believed, the F-ranked player had penetrated the armor of the S-ranked player and defeated him without a scratch, calling it nonsense. In his hospital room, Lee Hyun-wook, with band-aids on his face, watched the breaking news, which reported 745 casualties from the opening of the gate at Seoul Station. The news announcer said that because of the Seoul Station disaster, expert players and public associations were heavily criticized by angry people. Hyun-wook pondered that unlike the past two gates, he hadn't encountered this one directly, and he didn't have much information, so it was unclear what to expect. He carried himself swiftly toward Seoul Station, remembering that of all the calamities, this was one of the worst and most destructive in his past life. Looking at the digital clock showing 15 hours and 16 minutes, Hyun-wook anxiously wondered if he could prevent this tragedy with his current level of strength. While at the station, he thought a part of him wanted to go on a rampage to get as many people as possible to evacuate, saving their lives from imminent doom. However, seeing the officers patrolling the station, he realized that this was not the right thing to do, as it would cause panic and could lead to more civilian casualties. Stopping in the middle of the crowded station hall, Hyun-wook concentrated, knowing that somewhere here, among this unsuspecting crowd, an insidious villain was hiding. He realized that if things went south and the villain lay low, he would never be able to find the turning point that could change the future for the better. Lee Hyun-wook stood in the middle of the crowd at the station, feeling the tension building as there were only 2 minutes of precious time left before disaster struck. Suddenly, someone called his name loudly, and he turned around in surprise, not expecting to meet anyone he knew at such a critical moment. To his amazement, it turned out to be Vice Commander Choi Seong-ha, who, panting, exclaimed how long she had been looking for him in all this commotion. She reported that she'd heard he'd gotten into the police station last night, and because of that, their entire squad was now standing on their ears worrying. Hyun-wook thought uneasily that Choi Seon-hee wasn't here in his past life and asked her why his phone was broken, perplexed as to whether he had changed the past. He glanced at the scoreboard showing 15 hours and 23 minutes, realizing that there was only 1 minute left before the most dreaded gate would open. Choi Seon-ha, admitting that his phone was indeed broken, insisted that he explain to her in order what he was doing at the police station. Lee Hyun-wook briefly replied that he had absolutely no time for idle chatter as he needed to strictly stick to his plan. Without saying a word, he abruptly dumped the contents of his bag onto the floor, scattering many small blue balls, much to Choi Seon-ha's surprise. The people at the station recoiled in fright, and a man in a suit shouted indignantly that Hyun-wook was crazy, and you can't scatter incomprehensible objects like that. Choi Seon-ha screamed at Hyun-wook in a panic, demanding answers as to why he wasn't responding and doing things that were completely incomprehensible and frightening to those around him. Hyun-wook, ignoring her screams, calmly ordered her and the others to run to where the gas masks were stored as soon as he gave the signal. In the next second, the people in the station rushed to flee in terror, and a huge, ominous purple vortex began to form in the ceiling above them. This vortex was rapidly expanding, heralding the imminent opening of the gates to the other world and the appearance of terrible monsters wreaking havoc and destruction. Lee Hyun-wook and Choi Seong-ha looked up in alarm and amazement at the approaching incredible and deadly threat from another dimension. From the very center of the opening gate with a deafening roar, began to appear a huge, black-armored monster with burning yellow eyes. Lee Hyun-wook, upon seeing the monster, with determination and desperation in his voice, loudly shouted a single word. "Now!" signaling for action.